he's stripping you away from your comfort zone. He's pushing you out of the things that you were taught without going back and checking. Things that we talk about around the dining room table, but we never go back and fact check to see is that actually the case.
Right.
Now he's forcing us to do that, to do those fact checks here. And that forces you to get into this word, to get into the scriptures, to do the textual analysis, so that each and every one of us that are in this room right now, it's going to be incumbent upon you to teach the masses. I'm telling you, I'll and if Minister would like me to, I'll do a lesson on that, because I'm telling you.
All right, get it together.
Yeah, I'm telling you that it is because when the masses are awake, just think practically. He can't even wake up all of Israel right now, Ron.
True.
Brother Ron, if he woke up all of Israel right now, of all the churches, mosques, synagogues, and all of them, let me ask you one question. Where are they going?
Right.
There's not enough Hebrew congregations for them to even go to. Where are they going? So he has to let them stay asleep. But as we get closer and closer to the end of Earth's history as we know it, that's why he's forcing us, look, you only get this and get it now from an academic perspective. Prove all things, so when I do wake your people up, Moses, because they're going to give you problems, you're going to have to teach them. Because it's going to be complete and utter chaos coming soon. Actually, it's here now. I mean, America just the only country that hadn't experienced it. Turn on the BBC network and you see, man, the whole world is falling apart. It's falling apart. Even the Olympics being over in Rio, I'm just trying to filibuster around. Get ready. You ready? Okay, go ahead.
You can go ahead and come up, open up, pray, and go ahead and start.
All right. Let's stand up real quick. We're gonna pray. Okay, so it's the east. Everybody.
Straight in.
Dear Yahuwah, we thank you for waking us up this morning with life, health, and strength. Thank you for your goodness, grace, and your mercy. Thank you for allowing us to be here collectively with one another so that we can congregate, we can pull from each other, we can edify each other, we can equip and empower each other. Most High Yah. We thank you for Minister Milton Carnes for the word that he brought forth earlier. We pray that you will bless it and that it will be good seed on good ground. We pray that you touch my lips and anointing so that way I may speak with the Ruach as we need to speak, so that way I may also sow good seed into the hearts and the minds of those who are here. We pray that you would continue to have your Menological and your angels surround and protect us as this message goes forth. We pray that you would stay the hand of any enemy that would strive to disrupt or intervene and interfere with this message that's going forth on today. And we pray that this will continue to empower us to be better in our studies, better in our walk, and more so improve our character, Most High Yah, because only through love can those recognize the light that is in us that will lead them to you, Father. We love you, we thank you, we honor you, we praise you, we adore you, we admire you, and we lift you up on high, higher than you can ever be. And we thank you right now that you've heard this appeal in advance. And in your son, Yeshua HaMashiach, we pray, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
All right. Okay, thank you everybody for bearing with me. I actually forgot my camera, and thanks to Mrs. Carnes over there, she rushed and grabbed the spare backup camera so I can record. I also have, something up here. Y'all can go to my Facebook page, and you can share the link that I have up there, if you don't mind. Okay, it's up there. Right. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Everything should be live. Yep. So if y'all can go on your phones real quick and check out the link just to let me know if it comes up on your screen. You know, I was having an issue with Internet Explorer, but it should be displayed now. Keep that up. All right, so let's get ready to rock and roll. I don't want to be here for too long, but I have some good information that I want to follow up with this part 3. So everybody let me know when you're ready. Say Khan. Khan came. Khan came. Came. Okay, all right. We don't have a full house today, and that's good because it's a little more personal, a little more intimate. But I definitely want to show you guys something. Now, the good thing about my lectures being delayed is that I go back and I look at my information, I find more stuff. And I said, oh, let me share this because the lecture is not over. And I can't really do that sometimes when I do previous lectures because the lecture is already finished. So I want to see how many people have been paying attention because I'm going to get through this. And let's talk about something here, all right? Now, how many people here remember what intercalation means? What does it mean to intercalate? Raise your hand. This is very, very important. And that's one of the phrases I like to use a lot. Very, very important. Yes, Minister Carnes.
It means you're adding extra days to a calendar.
You're adding extra days in a calendar. Why?
So the seasons can line up. If not, then eventually the season will be out of season.
You see them be out of season, right? So for example, if you use strictly a lunar calendar and you get 354, 355 days in a year, it's going to trail behind the solar calendar, or the tropical year, which is approximately 365. Sometimes it can be 360 if that's farmers, etc. So intercalation is a method of ensuring that whatever methodology that you utilize to determine time lines up with other concurrent methods of determining time or reckoning time. So you have solar time, which is a tropical year, which I mentioned earlier, from season to season. You have a sidereal year that goes from one fixed point of the stars and the sun in the forefront and the stars in the back, and a full revolution, which trails about 20 minutes behind the tropical year. You also have the lunar year, which is 354, 355 days. It varies from year to year. So intercalation is a method of aligning all of these different calendars together so that way they're working in unison with one another, okay? So let's deal with this. Intercalation is important because the methodology for intercalation is not in the Torah. The Torah does not give us a methodology, mathematical methodology, or astronomical methodology in regards to how to intercalate time. So with the calendar, they're using strictly lunar calendar and they're falling back in time. How do you align it according to what the Torah says? But there's no real astronomical or mathematical formula that's there in order to determine exactly when to add additional apagomino days. And apagomino days are additional days that you add in order to help and assist with that quote unquote intercalation. But there is a method there. And I think this is something that's been overlooked because a lot of times when we go after other cultural paradigms on how to reckon time and we deviate away from what the Torah says, a lot of times we adopt their methods and it's not indigenous to our pre-exilic state that we once was in. So the Most High gives us everything that we need in Torah to determine time. Now, I want to see if anybody here can pick up on this because when I get towards the end, it's all going to make sense. But I got to see how many critical thinkers we got up in here so far, all right? So remember what I said that intercalation is. Can somebody else tell me what intercalation is? Besides Minister Carnes, he said it, but can anybody pick up on that? Intercalation, what does it mean to intercalate? To add extra days in order to coordinate. There you go, as far as different methods of reckoning time. So I'm gonna show you something interesting that I've never heard nobody teach before, but I'm gonna teach it to y'all. If you read here, Exodus or Shemot chapter 9, verse 31, and I went over this before, but I wanted to point something out. It says, now the flax and the barley were ruined, for the barley was in the ear. And we know that this phrase here literally means what? Abib. Abib is when the barley is in the ear, when it's ripe for plucking. That's important. And the flax was in the bud, but the wheat and spelt were not ruined, for they ripen late. Have the word intercalation here. So you have to wait on the barley when it's in the ear in order to know when Abib starts, along with the astronomical signs. And you also have to ensure that the wheat itself comes later on, and when it's ripe, it's supposed to align with the Shavuot, etc. It's intercalation. Here, Vayikra or Leviticus 26 and 4 says, then I shall give you rains. I shall give you. Who's that? Most High. I shall give you rains in their season. Not the earth, not Mother Nature, not man. The Most High said, I will. But why? So that the land will yield its produce and the trees of the field will bear their fruit. Indeed, your threshing will last for you until great gathering, and great gathering will last until sowing time. You will thus eat your food to the full and live securely in your land. Intercalation is that the Most High is responsible for ensuring that the rains are in their season and so that the land will yield its produce. Another method of intercalation, very important. We go to Devarim 16:9, the Deuteronomy 16:9. You shall count 7 weeks for yourself. You shall begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain. So this barley being in the air, the wheat ripening, the rains in its season, the land yielding its produce, and the trees bearing its fruit, all has to align also to the time when you put the sickle to the standing grain. And all of these methods here will vary slightly year to year, several years to several years, decade to decade, etc. These are all methods of intercalating time. How many of you ever heard this before? I've never heard this before. Interesting, right? Interesting. Okay. So the Most High has already given us the tools that we need to intercalate. We don't have to use a mathematical formula. Just look at nature. We've been so disconnected from nature. We need to go back to it. All right. Here we go. Jeremiah 5:24. They do not say in their heart, let us now fear Yahuwah Elohim, who gives rain in its season. Who? Yahuwah Elohim gives rain in its season, both the autumn rain and the spring rain, who keeps for us the appointed weeks of the harvest. He keeps the appointed weeks of the harvest. He is the one that's responsible for ensuring that everything happens within its season. So at certain times, if he feels that time is slowing for whatever reason, he can withhold the rain. Thank you. I'm listening. Mark 4:28 says, when the crop permits, he immediately puts in the sickle because the harvest has come. This is very important. The soil produces crop by itself, first the blade, then the head, then the mature grain in the head. So you have to look at nature in order for you to intercalate time. When I get into the model, y'all gotta be like, wow, that's really interesting. All right, so we get through this part. Okay, I went through the animal nature, about the donkey and everything. All right, more intercalation. Whether if you walk in, listen to this. This is very important. If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments so as to carry them out, then I shall give you rains in their season. Now, hold on. Before we read, Moses said, I will give you rains in their season, but there's a prerequisite or requirement on our part in order for that to line up. See, what happens is the Most High is responsible for, again, slowing down certain things, speeding up certain things so things could be within its season. But when we're disobedient and we don't allow the land to rest, like the Israelites didn't, now it throws everything off because now we're breaking these things and now the rains are not going to come in their seasons, right? Not just the rains, the earth is not going to produce when it's supposed to produce. The Israelites had to get kicked out of the land so the Most High can fix everything because we were not keeping the statute, laws, and commandments. That's why today, now, because of technology, it further deteriorates all of these things. Because now the Most High has given, to a certain degree, authority back into the hands of the wicked until it's time for them to return and destroy them and renew and renovate everything. Are you following me? Yeah. So if we want to ensure that we're following the correct method of time, we have to keep the statutes, laws, and commandments. Okay. It shall come about if you listen obediently to my commandments, which I command you this day, to love Yahuwah Elohim and to serve him with all your heart and your soul, that he will give the rain for your land in its season, the early and late rain, that you may gather in your grain and your new wine and your oil. Devarim 28:12. Yahuwah will open for you his good storehouse. His storehouse is the heavens, when he releases something to give rain to your land in its season and to bless all the work of your hand, and you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. Again, the Most High is responsible for intercalation in regards to nature, but we have to keep the statute, laws, and commandments so we're in alignment with the order of things so that way things can work within its season. But when we are out of commandments, and we're not keeping Torah, then the problem is things start to get thrown off, and we have to find another way of fixing things as opposed to going back to the statute of the commandments. Yes?
Brother, I'm sorry. I'm thinking it's a break, man. Just intercalation. Just one more time.
Sure. Okay.
That's a method of reconciling time.
Yes, and I'll give you an example. Okay. So you have the tropical year, which is about 365 and a quarter days. Gotcha. You have a sidereal year, which is 365 and a quarter, sans 20 minutes because it slightly goes behind the tropical year. So tropical year is when you see the sun is rising in the equinox. It starts to come right above the meridian or the horizon, additional degree above 0.0 every year. And that's something you can see empirically. But the sidereal year is when you have a star constellation that is behind the sun during that time of year, or the vernal equinox, which would be the spring. So there's a slight 20-minute difference there between the sidereal year where you use the stars and the tropical year where you use the sun. And then you have what's called the lunation, or full lunation, or lunar year. It's about 354 to 355, depending upon the moon. And what happens is, because you have all these different methods of reckoning time, they're not the same. So what you have to do is sometimes you have to use a mathematical formula. I mentioned it before when we look at Babylon, adding a 13th month because they was using the lunar cycle. So that was behind 10 to 11 days in regards to the tropical year. And if you go 3 years, you're a whole 30 days off. So what they had to do was add a 13th month every 2 to 3 years in order for the lunar calendar to keep up with the solar calendar, which will keep up with the seasons. Got it? All right, cool. But what I'm saying is, the Most High gave us the solution in the Torah. Man does not have to involve his hand. But you'll see, in other cultures, man involved his hand. And when Israel went into captivity, Israel started to involve their hand, but the Most High said, I already gave you everything you need here. But see, we haven't seen this. I haven't seen nobody really teach this, and this is very important, all right? All right, I'm gonna go into one more thing, because I got through that. Okay, I went into all of this. Let me go past this. All right, now how many of y'all remember when I was talking about the Exodus? And when I was mentioning the Exodus, I said something very important to you guys as far as the lunar reckoning, right? How many of y'all remember that? Raise your hand. You remember that? Okay. I'm gonna test y'all in 1 second. Yeah, I'm gonna test y'all in 1 second. All right, but before I go there, remember I brought this up to y'all when I was telling you about the priestly code or the sacerdotal menology, and I was talking about the civil menology. And I was mentioning the difference between Leviticus 23 and Deuteronomy chapter 16. And I was showing you that the quote-unquote sacerdotal calendar, the priests are responsible for counting the days. The layman responsible for heeding the call after the priesthood was responsible for counting the days. But then also in Vayikra, we also have the Feast of Trumpets, and we also have Yom Kippur that we don't see in Deuteronomy 16. Because Yom Kippur had nothing to do with the layman. That was the priesthood. That's why we don't see it there. That was part of the civil menology, or the things that the layman was responsible for keeping, because the Chageg, or the pilgrimage feast, was responsible for them to come and appear before the Most High 3 times a year. Now, the priest was not given that instruction because they were always working the temple. So again, when you look at the text, Leviticus 23 for the sacerdotal calendar or the priesthood, and then you go to Deuteronomy chapter 16 dealing with the civil menology or the calendar that dealt with the layman, you'll start to juxtapose them or contrast and compare and see that there are specifics here that you don't see over there because the priesthood is responsible for this element. I want to point that out. But going back to what I was saying in regards to the Exodus, what did I say to you guys in regards to the 3 days of darkness? Does anybody remember the 3 days of darkness?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been so like miraculous or significant if it was already supposed to be a waning moon.
There you go, or a dark moon. Excellent, excellent. All right. All right. So I want to show you guys one other thing that I discovered. I said, why didn't I add that? All right. So we have the lunar reckoning. This is what I have right here for you when I showed you this. But I want to show y'all something else. Exodus guidance needed due to dark moon. Can somebody read this to me? Can anybody see this?
Then they set out from
The Sukkot.
Sukkot and camped in Etham on the edge of the wilderness. Then Yah was going before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them
Slow
light.
down. Say that one more time.
And he
Verse
led
21.
them on the way. And,
Verse 21.
okay, and then Yah was going before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on the way, and in a pillar of fire by night
to do what?
to give them light.
Keep going.
That they might travel by day and by night.
So, if the lunar reckoning for the 3 days, 3 nights of darkness also affected the nighttime, and it wouldn't have been miraculous if it was a dark moon because it's already dark, And then when the full moon comes into effect, we see a couple of chapters later, Most High said this is going to be the first of months for you. Now we have a situation where 14 days pass, Pesach happened. The 15th day, starting in the evening, would be what? Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then they leave out. So if we start as a full moon and we count 15 days in, what kind of moon you'll have during that period of time? Dark moon. Hence why you need the fire by night to give you light. Because if you know anything about navigation, they always start their course when the moon is full, when they leave out. But if they're leaving out as a dark moon, they don't know where they're going, so the Most High has to give them fire by night to give them light so that they travel by day and by night. So how the moon is used to navigate at night, sometimes it's possible to see the moon in the sky before the sun has set. In this case, look at the illuminated side of this late afternoon or evening moon, and it will be in the west. If, however, the moon rises in the night sky after midnight, the illuminated side will be in the east. Use this information to determine a rough east-west direction that you can reference while moving at night. The ancients would have been well familiar with this. Today, most of us won't even be familiar with this. But they understood if we're going to start to travel, we're going to wait so that way we can see the moon, so we know at least what direction we're going before we get started. But if it's a dark moon, we need something to help guide us at night. Got it? All right. Like that? That was good?
That was good.
That was good. All right. I like to have fun. All right. So I'm gonna skip all the way to where I need to be at. Does anybody have any questions? I'll take a quick question real quick because I really want to run through this. Anybody got a quick question so far? I want to make sure everybody understands where we at so far. No? Okay. So everybody understands what's going on. All right. I like that. You're like, give me the PowerPoint. So we ain't hear you talk. I want to read it for myself. All right. I want to at least present my information first. I know. I got you. Yeah, I got you. Because you're not going to have the animation, you know. You're not going to have me acting all, you know. I know. All right. That's like saying, I don't want to watch the movie. Just give me the transcript. I want to read the movie. Don't give me the actors. I want to read the movie. All right. Just think of this as the movie with the captions, right? All right. So we went through Babylon. Where did we end off at? Let me see if y'all was paying attention. Where did we end off at? Those of y'all that was here last Shabbat. No, right before Rome. Where was we at? What did I say? Who did I say Babylon influenced? Think about the various captivities the Israelites was in. You had them. Say again. Somebody said it. Say it loud. Greek. All right. Because remember, we passed Persia and we went into Greek. And remember, we learned about the Israelites chilling when I was in captivity. You know, waxing fat and all of that, man. Keeping slaves, not releasing nobody. They was happy. All right. So went into the months. And again, it's good to know the Hebrew months of today, just so that way you can understand the reckoning of time, right? So I'm not saying it's wrong, anything like that. I'm just saying it's good to know it alongside what the Most High has already designated Israel to do before we went into captivity. All right, so I went into the Macedonian calendar. I'll show you guys how that was influenced by the Babylonian calendar, especially looking at the Metonic cycle, which has to do with the 19-year cycle, intercalation added, etc. So I'm going to read this and we're going to move forward, all right? So this is to help validate what I was saying in regards to the Greek, more so the Greek calendar before we even get to the Roman calendar, all right? Alexander's conquest and the subsequent settlement of Greeks and Macedonians in the territories of the East brought to the successive kingdoms a number of calendric systems based on the Macedonian nomenclature for months and days. Nomenclature has to do with naming, okay? Although Macedonian month names were used extensively in these areas, the actual calendars differed drastically, which means that there was not one uniform calendar. Depending as they did upon the different rapprochements made between Macedonia and local systems. Many of these local systems are very well attested and we can clearly see how they work. On the other hand, the Macedonian calendar itself, that is the calendar which might be called pure Macedonia as it worked in Macedonia itself, or at most in all Greece, is very poorly attested. What can be known about the original Macedonian calendar must be deduced from knowledge of the offshoots in the East, with only occasional supplements and support for Macedonian epigraphical material. That means things that you write on top of, right? Epi means upon, graphical has to do with writing, all right? Thus, any discussion of the Macedonian calendar must begin not with the original calendar, but the adaptations of it. The Seleucid calendar, when Alexander the Great marched his army into Babylonia, he brought the Macedonians into contact with the calendar better than any used for civil purposes in any other state and that has to do with the Babylonians. So when they went into Babylon, they saw a calendar, was like, oh, this is good, we're gonna use this. And they created they adopted their Macedonian calendar to follow after Babylon. It's very important, all right? I'm not going to read all of this, but I want you to understand the Seleucids, because the Seleucids were responsible for what region during the Grecian reign? What region were they responsible for control? You had the Ptolemies and you had the Seleucids. Seleucids was in what region? Jerusalem, and more so Levant region, from Syria all the way towards the Negev desert. And then you had the Ptolemies, which was taking over Egypt, and they was warring and fighting with each other, all right? But the Seleucid is important because that calendar was based off the Macedonian calendar, which was then influenced by the Babylonian calendar. Okay? All right. Say again.
Macedonians were first then?
Yeah, well, Alexander the Great was a Macedonian. And when he was conquering the known world, he entered into Babylon, saw the calendar system, and what they did was made adaptations to the reckoning of time that they already had, and used the framework or the foundation or the blueprint of Babylon. And what they did was they took that with them into the known world. Alexander the Great died, and he had successors or generals that took his steed because he didn't really appoint a successor because he died very young. So then you had the Ptolemies that was there towards the west, and you had the Seleucids that was there towards the east, and they were warring with one another. But the Seleucids, the reason why I'm bringing them up is because they had influence on the Israelites in Palestine, all right? So in the Seleucid calendar, with Macedonian month names assigned to the months in the Babylonian cycle, Dios was the first month and corresponded to Tashritu, the 7th Babylonian month, beginning the second half of the Babylonian year after the autumnal equinox, thus corresponding to the Babylonian intercalation of Adaru and Ululu in years 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, and 19 of each cycle. Remember, the Babylonians used a lunar calendar, so they had to intercalate or add a 13th month to their cycle to keep the lunar calendar in alignment with the tropical year, which is 365 and a quarter days. Okay? All right. So we're seeing here that the Greeks are adopting the same methodology. All right? Follow me? Okay. A second, Zendikos was intercalated. Zendikos was one of the months of the Grecian calendar. And in year 17 of the Babylonian year, a second Hyperborataios or 12th Seleucid month was intercalated. Although the relationship between Macedonia and Babylonian months persisted in Syria and Mesopotamia at least until 1617 AD, the determination of the first month of the year varied in place and possibly in time. The Babylonian calendar continued in use by the scribes in Babylonia, from whom the new year began with Nisan Nu, even after the adoption of the Seleucid era, the first year of which began in 311 BCE, that was after Alexander the Great. April 2 to the 3rd, Nisan Nu first. The evidence of coins from Seleucia on the Tigris shows that the Babylonian calendar with Nisan Nu, which equals to Arta Misios, as the first month, was in the use during the Parthian period and can be demonstrated for 15 to 16 AD. Read the last one. With this evidence for the survival of the Babylonian New Year, it will be safe to assume the strict Seleucid system with Dios as the first month only in the Seleucid West during the life of the dynasty, and perhaps even more restrictively, only in Greek texts dated to the Seleucid era and by the Seleucid monarchs. So what we're saying is, we're seeing the influence of Babylon on the Macedonian calendar, and the archaeological evidence is aligning these various months that we see in Babylon with the corresponding month in the Macedonian calendar, which we have right here. Currently, we may conclude that a second correlation between Macedonian and Babylonian months was introduced sometime between 15 and 16 AD and 46 to 47 AD. This yields the following correlation. Nisan Nu is Artemisios, Aru is Dionysios, Sinanu is Panemos, Duzu is Loios, Abu is Gorpiaios, Ulu, etc. So what they're doing is they're showing you the correlation based on the archaeological evidence and some of the scant historical reference that we have, so you can see how the Babylonian months was lining up with the Macedonian or Grecian months that was used in a Seleucid area, or the time period where the Seleucids was empowered in the Levant region. And we can look at certain dates here depending upon numismatics or coinage that they use, archaeological finds, historical records, etc. So pretty much what I'm showing you guys here is evidence that Babylon was still from the grave, reaching out and touching somebody. And that was the Greeks. All right? They ain't dead. Babylon is still alive and kicking. All right? Alexander the Great, the Seleucid Empire. I mean, I don't need to really read this for you. I'll read this part. The Seleucid kingdom was a major center of Hellenistic culture, which maintained the preeminence of Greek customs and manners over the indigenous cultures of the Middle East. Say it one more time. The Seleucid kingdom was a major center of Hellenistic culture, which maintained the preeminence of Greek customs and manners over the indigenous cultures of the Middle East. So now you have this ideology of Hellenism that's saying we're going to look at all the indigenous peoples and we're going to amalgamate them into this Hellenistic system, so that way we can teach them Greek customs, manners, language, philosophy, etc. So that way we can centralize all of the known world's information and we can put it in one location, and then we can put a Greek stamp on it. That's how you got the LXX or the Septuagint, because the Greeks wanted to Hellenize our culture and bring it into their culture. Very interesting. And it's interesting that that is actually the earliest Hebrew text that we have attested as far as the Tanakh is concerned. It's very interesting that if that is attested as the earliest and nothing indigenous in regards to our own Hebrew text, because there was an agenda involved in regards to burning material. We're going to see that's what the Greeks did. Because if the Greeks translate your text and they destroy the original, when people go back and look at history, they're going to be like, wow, I guess this is Greeks created this. The Hebrews didn't create this, because all we got is Greeks. We ain't got no Hebrew, man. But if you know the history, you don't see that the Greeks burned it. There's an agenda, because now they get to claim ownership, because then you have the burden of proof of proving that the Hebrew was actually original when you don't have it. Okay. A Greek-speaking Macedonian aristocratic class dominated Seleucia state throughout its history, although this dominance was most strongly felt in urban areas. Resistance to Greek cultural hegemony peaked during the reign of Antiochus IV, whose promotion of Greek culture culminated in his raising a statue to Zeus in the temple at Jerusalem. He had previously ordered the Jews to build shrines to idols and to sacrifice pigs and other unclean animals, and had forbidden circumcision. Well, hold on. That's the token of the covenant. So the Israelites lose that. There's no remnant. Okay. Essentially prohibiting on pain of death the practice of the Jewish law. This persecution of the Jews and desecration of the temple sparked the Maccabean uprising beginning in 165. We're going to go through that because we're going to see why that's important in regards to the calendar. Now, Maccabean revolt account regarding attempt at calendrical changes by the Seleucids. First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 41. I'm reading this with historical context, all right? We're not talking about authenticity in regards to it being canonized. We're talking in regards to historical context. Then the king wrote to the whole kingdom that all people should be one people. New world order, one world government. You erase all the lines of sovereignty and you make everybody one humankind. That way you get rid of nationality, ethnicity, etc. That's why I see all these movies about aliens coming to attack the earth, and everybody's like, let's band together. We're not this, we're not that, we're all one people, because now you're erasing the sovereignty lines and you get rid of the historical continuity to the nation state that you once was a part of. And in this way, your identity is now given to you by the world government or the world state. They're just gonna call you human. They're gonna get rid of the historical continuity and just call you human. Now you get to see where this is coming from. It's nothing new under the sun. And abandoning their particular customs, all the Gentiles conformed to the command of the king. But why not? And many Israelites delighted in his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Shabbat. The king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and to the cities of Judah, ordering them to follow customs foreign to their land, to prohibit burnt offerings, sacrifices, and libations in the sanctuary, and to profane the Sabbaths and feast days. Wow. To desecrate the sanctuary and the sacred ministers, to build pagan altars and temples and shrines, to sacrifice swine and unclean animals, to leave their sons uncircumcised, and to defile themselves with every kind of impurity and abomination, so that they may forget the law and change all its ordinances. Keep following me. Whoever refused to act according to the command of the king was put to death. In words such as these, he wrote this to the whole kingdom. He appointed inspectors over all the peoples, and he ordered the cities of Judah to offer sacrifices, each city in turn. Many of the people, those who abandoned the law, joined them and committed evil in the land. They drove Israel into hiding wherever places of refuge could be found. On the 15th day of the month of Kislev, in the year 145, the king erected the desolating abomination upon the altar. You heard that before. Upon the altar of burnt offerings. You heard that before. Upon the offering of burnt sacrifice. Guys, you heard this before, right? the abomination of desolation, I was repeating it for a reason.
Right.
And in the surrounding cities, it's very important according to prophecy, right? And in the surrounding cities of Judah, they built pagan altars. They also burned incense at the doors of houses and the streets. Any scrolls of the law that they found, they tore up and burned. So now the Israelites is giving their vantage point of this historical event. Because if we didn't have this, then we would think that the quote-unquote Tanakh was a Greek original, and it wasn't Hebraic. But you need to look at the history to see how that happened. So the important thing we focus on is profaning the Sabbath and the feast days. So if you profane this and you change this, then you don't need a calendar. You're going to have to adopt somebody else's calendar. And this is what sparked the revolution. It was a revolution. All right. I'm not gonna go through this. I'm gonna skip past it, but that's the Maccabean revolt. Go back and research the Maccabean revolt and the Hasmonean dynasty. All right, the Hasmonean dynasty is important because once the Israelites took off the yoke of oppression from the Greeks and established their own body politic, they had a Renaissance period. This is where we start to see the earliest writings of the Tanakh happen during this time period, Torah Tanakh during this time period, because now we don't have no oppressors over us. And what happens is they burnt all of our material, so now we have to rewrite these things to keep this record. That's when you go to the Dead Sea Scrolls, the earliest Dead Sea Scrolls, let's not rush too far. The earliest Dead Sea Scrolls date you back to that time period, right during the Maccabean revolt, all right? The Dead Sea Scrolls was a result of the Renaissance period of the Israelite culture during the Hasmonean dynasty. Very, very important. There's a book called Women in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Evidence for a Quran Renaissance during the reign of Queen Salome, Alexandra. Queen Salome is one of the successors in regards to the Maccabees, etc. You want to go ahead and research her and see why that's important. But why am I showing you this? Because during this period of time, during the Hasmonean state, we start to have all of these new writings that start to appear that we retrieved back in the 1940s, and we call it the Dead Sea Scrolls. Because now we had nobody that was oppressing us, nobody that had a yoke upon us to tell us, you can't write this, you can't write that, and now we can write all this material. Now, why is this important? We just read before that they forced us, or attempted to force us, to profane the Sabbath and the feast days. So then, once we get the oppressors away from us, now we have to find some way to restore what was lost. And a lot of this restoration had to come from oral tradition and whatever scant manuscripts they may have had at that time, so that way they can create a brand new corpus of body of text so they can restore what was lost. And what I'm going to show you here is this is when you start to get what's called the Enochian calendar. Because the Enochian calendar, the earliest manuscripts that we have were during this Hasmonean period. And again, if the Greeks are using, or the Seleucids are using the Macedonian calendar, which is based off the Babylonian calendar, then we know that once this entity or the Hellenists are trying to impose their calendrical system on the Israelites take the yoke off. Israelites are like, man, we have to find some way to go back to the old ways. This is when you start to have the Enochian calendar. Now, how many of y'all are familiar with the Enochian calendar? Raise your hand. Okay, to those who are not, I'm going to just give you a summary. The Enochian calendar, this is what the chart looks like. You have a situation where the sun is running its course through the heavenly realm, and then for 3 months you have 30 days, and then you have this Epagomeno period of time, which is it's not really Epagomeno, it's counted. But this is when the sun goes into its chamber and it starts to come back out of its chamber to start a new season. And this continues this in 4 successive periods of time, okay? So the time period when the sun goes into its chamber starts these various periods of time, whether it's the autumnal equinox, the winter solstice, the vernal equinox, the summer solstice. This is when the sun is in its chamber and it brings in forth the new season, all right? This is the same thing that we have here. I have the Paleo-Hebrew indicating these month periods. And the Paleo-Hebrew is describing not the pre-exilic reckoning of time, because we only have 4 months as mentioned, but the Babylonian names that we have here. Now, I'm going to read this. The Enoch calendar is an ancient calendar described in a pseudographical book of Enoch. It divided the year into 4 seasons of exactly 13 weeks each. Each such season consisted of 2 30-day months, followed by 1 31-day month. And the 31st day ended the season, so that Enoch's year consisted of exactly 364 days. The Enoch calendar was purportedly given to Enoch by the angel Uriel. 4 named days inserted as the 31st day of every 3rd month were named instead of numbered, which placed them outside the numbering. The book of Enoch gives the count of 2,912 days for 8 years, which divides out to exactly 364 days per year. This specifically excludes any periodic intercalation. Let me say it again. This specifically excludes any periodic intercalations. Now, when we look at the book of Enoch, we see that there's no way of intercalating time, which means that the calendar starts to go back. There's nothing in the text that tells you how to fix time. Therefore, there's going to be something off in regards to the Enochian calendar. And if there is, we have to take the good out of it, what it attempted to establish, and leave the rest behind. And we have to take the good and use it during what we research in the course of history, archaeology, the scriptural text, to help reformulate this reckoning of time that is specified specifically in Torah. Let's move forward. All right, I'm not going to read all of this. This is 1 Enoch chapter 72. If you guys want to see in detail what I read to you in a previous slide, go to 1 Enoch chapter 72, right? But I'm going to read up to verse 3, all right? It says, book of the motion of the luminaries of the heaven, how each one of them stands in relation to their number and to their power and to their times and to their names and their origins and their months, as the holy angel Uriel, who is their leader, showed to me when he was with me. And he showed me their whole description as they are, and for the years of the world to eternity until creation will be made anew to last forever. This is the first law of the luminaries. The light called sun has its exit amongst the gates of heaven in the east, and it sets among the gates of heaven in the west. And I saw 6 gates from which the sun rises, and 6 gates where the sun sets, and also the moon rises and sets in these gates, as well as the leaders of the stars together with those which they lead. 6 gates are in the east and 6 gates in the west. Of all them are arranged in sequence, and there are many windows to the right and to the left of these gates. And it says, and the first comes out of the great light called sun, and its roundness is as the roundness of heaven, and it is filled with fire that illuminates and heats. And the chariot in which it rises, the winds drive, and the sun goes down from the heaven, and it turns towards north in order to travel towards east, and is guided in such a way that it enters into the proper gate and shines again in the heaven. Then it goes to say, in this way the sun emerges in the first month of the great gate, the 4th of these 6 gates in the east. And this goes on to tell you the various courses that the sun goes in regards to the various days of the year. 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, in regards to the seasons. And then you have the 4 Pagomino days that's not really included, because those days help to bring in the Teshuvah, or the turn of the season, when the sun goes into this chamber and when it comes back out to start the next season. Now, why did I highlight verse 3? And I saw 6 gates from which the sun rises, and 6 gates where the sun sets, and also the moon rises and set in these same gates, as well as the leaders of the stars together with those which they lead. We have the sun, the moon, and the stars in regards to the Enochian calendar. So you cannot have this calendar strictly solar and yet neglect the stars and the moon. And also, some people it's quieting because they say, oh, the Enochian calendar is only solar. Well, we're going to see if that's the case. First Enoch, Book of Luminaries, 72 to 82. Those 10 chapters deal with the Book of Luminaries, talking about astronomical time, reckoning of time via sidereal and tropical year. Remember, I went over sidereal year with y'all? Yeah. Has to do with looking at the constellation that brings in the sun each season. And the tropical year, which has to do with the count of how many days that the sun takes from one season to the next season, all right? First Enoch 74 and 12 says, and the sun and the stars bring in all the years exactly. The sun by itself. The sun by itself. All the years exactly. Okay. So that they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto eternity, but complete the years with perfect justice in 364 days. Which means that in order for you to determine when the year comes in exactly, you have to look at the sun and the stars. So when I tell you about the sidereal year, or the positioning of the sun in front of the constellation, the background constellation, which brings the sun in, and again, due to axial precession, that will change every 26,000 years, and you'll have a different astronomical age. This is very, very important, every 2,160 years. The reason why I'm saying this is because you cannot have a Enochian calendar and don't include the stars. So if you don't see a proper line between the sun and the stars, then something's off in regards to this calendar. Okay, I don't know if you got that yet. And 1 Enoch 75:1 says, and their leaders as at the head of each 1,000 stars, who are appointed to rule over the whole creation And over all stars have to do also with the 4 additional days, or the Pagomino days, that the sun is going to the various chambers, without deviating from their positions, corresponding to the computus of the year. And they render service also on these 4 days, which are not counted in the computus of the year, meaning that the 4 days are the Pagomino days, because technically you have 360 days if you're only doing a 30-day count for every season. So those 4 additional days are called Pagomino days, and not really reckoned in regards to the calendrical system. They're just there to let you know that the sun is going into the chamber to end one season and coming out to bring into the next season. Those 4 days are normally not counted. But the stars are important. And with respect to these 4 days, people err, since these luminaries do true service also in the following positions of the cosmos, once in the first gate, once in the third gate, once in the fourth gate, once in the sixth gate, so that the accuracy of return of the world achieved after 364 days with respect to the positioning of the cosmos. So that means that you cannot have a Enochian calendar without the sun, the stars, and we're going to see the moon. So if you just have a Enochian calendar with just the sun, something's wrong, because people are not reading all of this, or maybe they're overlooking it, but you need stars. And this is going to show you a problem. You're going to get into a problem. All right. First Enoch, Book of Luminaries, reckoning of time via the lunation on the moon. First Enoch 76 says, and when the moon rises, it becomes first visible on the sky when it contains the light of 1/2 of the 1/7 part of its total. In 14 steps, it completes its full light. In 14 steps, it goes to its complete light. So the assumption is it starts dark and it gets light, right? 14 steps? Right. All right. And 15 parts of light are put, into it until in 15 days, its light is completed according to the character of the year, and it makes 15 parts while the moon is in its 14th part. And when the moon is waning, what does waning mean? Say again?
Going dark.
It's going dark. Waning, okay. And waning, it decreases on the first day to 14 parts of light, and on the second day, it decreases to 13 parts. On the third day, it decreases to 12. On the fourth, it decreases to 11. On the fifth, it decreases to 10. On the sixth, it decreases to 9. On the seventh, it decreases to 8. On the eighth, it decreases to 7. And on the ninth, it decreases to 6 parts. And on the 10th, it decreases to 5 parts. On the 11th, it decreases to 4 parts. And on the 12th, it decreases to 3 parts. And on the 13th, it decreases to 2 parts. And on the 14th, it decreases to 1/2 of 1/7 of its total light. And on the 15th, is consumed what remains of the total. And in certain months, the moon is visible for each one of the 29 days, and at times for 28 days. Then Uriel showed me another rule, how light is put into the moon and where it is put into it from the sun. So they understood that the moon was a reflection of the light from the sun. All right. But this right here is very, very important. We see the word waning there, right? We see it says that when the moon rises, it becomes first visible on the sky when it contains the light of 1/2 of 1/7 part of its total. In 14 steps, it completes its full light. So it's talking about the FVC, the first visible crescent. When it first rises, you see the first visible crescent. This is what they're talking about in regards to the moon. But we're going to see something very interesting in regards to the book of Enoch, because I don't see a lot of people who promote the Enochian calendar. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying we got to go back over and examine this. They never bring into account the stars and this element of the moon. I don't hear them talking about it. Okay. Is there discrepancies in the lunar reckoning of First Enoch, the Book of Luminaries? I'm going to show you something very interesting. Let me just read this. Chapter 73 of the Ethiopian Book of Luminaries expounds the illumination of the moon in parts, while chapter 74 is concerned with its movement. The moon is presented in chapter 73, verse 1, as the minor luminary. In this chapter, the beginning of the month is marked by the coming into existence of the moon on the 13th day, suggesting, according to standard Babylonian astronomical terminology, that the preceding lunar month was hollow. The month mentioned could also be the solar month of 30 days without changing the meaning of the verse. So they're trying to see that even though you're looking at the moon, it's not interfering with the solar month, okay? It says such interpretation could be conceived on the basis that the sun is clearly seen as the greater in rank among the luminaries. This month, which is talked of as starting with the appearance of the moon on the 13th day of the moon or the sun, is a lunar month. What is described of the surface of the moon in light or a period of lunar visibility, 1/7 of its half part seems to be the appearance of the first crescent of the following day. This is confirmed in the latter part of verse 7, where the moon is said to become dark on the first day of the lunar month in respect to its 13 parts that night. In particular, in this particular chapter, the lunar reckoning clearly starts with the appearance of the first crescent. We heard that before, remember? This is an important observation and will become evident below. Chapter 74, it says, of the Ethiopic Book of Luminaries gives a description of the movements of the sun and the moon from gate to gate based on a simple arithmetical scheme that is well known from Confidence treaties. The chapter, however, will also contain key elements, it is argued, represents remnants of older traditions reckoning the lunar month differently. Pay attention to this, because people don't talk about this. This is what textual criticism comes to place. First Enoch 74:3, an alternative lunar reckoning, Nuga Bayor proposed the following translation of the verse. And in steps of fractions of seventh, literally single 7 parts, the full moon is completed in the east, and in steps of fractions of seventh, complete darkness is reached in the west. Now look at this. Although Nuga Bayor does not indicate which particular manuscript he follows, his translation clearly suggests a sequential observation of waxing and waning of the moon, which is consistent with the material presented in 1 Enoch 73, a state of affairs which should be expected in the light of the preceding chapter, where the lunar month starts with the sighting of the first crescent. This situation is reversed if one follows the translations of either Isaac or Nib, following a different manuscript. This is more than one book of Enoch floating around. Okay. Isaac's translation suggests the moon wanes in 15 steps during a period of 15 days and waxes in 14 steps in the east and the west, respectively. Nib translates, in 7 parts it makes all its darkness full, and in 7 parts it makes all its light full, either in the east or the west. And the most recent translation today, Nickelberg Van der Korn suggests, in 1/7 part it completes all its light in the east and in the west. Both Isaac and Nib translations mention the waning of the moon first. Wait, what is the waning of the moon? It's going from light to... But before, we see the other translation was from dark to light. First visible crescent, dark to light. Which means that when you look at the various manuscripts, there's more than one tradition in here. And a redactor came behind and said, oh, wait, something's wrong. Something's wrong. We have 2 different reckonings. All right, we're going to put these manuscripts that are talking about going from full to dark, and we're going to align the new translations that we got to work with the previous chapter. See, if you don't do textual criticism, you don't see that they tucked away the old tradition to align a new tradition to go in accordance with what everything we was saying in the previous chapter. Now, I'm not gonna read all this, but I'm gonna get through some of this because I want you to understand that in order for me to determine if the Enochian calendar was legit or not, is that I had to do textual criticism based on what this was telling me. This is the source of the calendrical variations in Second Temple Judaism by Stephanie Solier, all right? Both the Isaac and Nib translation mention the waning of the moon first. Isaac follows manuscript A, indicates in his notes the alternative reading of manuscript C, which agrees with Nebuchadnezzar's translation. Clearly, the Isaac Nib line of translation marks a contrast with the preceding chapters as regards the mode of observation of the lunar month from its start to its end in sequential manner. Following chapter 73, one would assume an observation based on a cycle of first crescent, waxing of the moon into full moon, then waning of the moon into moon. Rather, in both Isaac and Nib, one is left with the impression that the observation started at full moon and not the moon, thus observing first for 15 days the waning of the moon until its total darkness, which is the new moon. The second part of the observation concerns itself with the waxing of the moon in 14 steps, presumably and logically from the sighting of the first crescent until it waxes, culminates in the full moon. Let me skip over here. It says this statement, let me read this. This statement suggests that indeed there are a great many possible translations, as there are a great many variants which could be well more reliable. So in textual criticism, if you see something that looks like an anomaly, and you see something is here that looks kind of strange, and something here looks more uniform, the chances are this thing that was an anomaly is a much older tradition. And then over time, redactors go back and they see this and say, man, you know what? This doesn't really align with everything. So let me see if I can fix it. Let me see if I can fix this. So that way it can really align with what the previous text was saying. They're trying to make things harmonize instead of acknowledging that there's an older tradition that came from somewhere and saying, listen, you know what, if this was there, how about we investigate to see why that's there? But they don't try to do that. They try to make everything work together. They're hiding this full moon reckoning. I'm telling you this for a reason. Yet the possibility remains that originally there were 2 traditions, or rather 2 different manners of reckoning the lunar month, which are reflected in these, not just differing, but opposite expositions of observation of the lunar cycle. One way of reckoning started the lunar month at the first sighting of the first crescent and described the changes in the appearance of the moon in a sequential manner from waxing to waning, from the first crescent to full moon to new moon. This is exemplified in the Nagubor translation. The other way of reckoning describes the appearance of the moon also in a sequential way, This time from waning to waxing, from full moon to first crescent to full moon, as visible from Isaac's use of manuscript C. Could this be the indication that the book of luminaries bear witness to various ways of reckoning the lunar month? One started the month at the first crescent in chapter 73, the other started the month on the day of the full moon on chapter 74. It is the present author's suspicion that it does. Let me skip, I don't want to keep reading. But pretty much what we see here is that we had a situation where the old tradition was there, it was kicked aside for a new tradition, and in regards to 1 Enoch chapter 74 to align with everything that you're reading in chapter 73. Which means that this full moon reckoning is being hidden, it's being fixed, it's being covered, it's being buried. Interesting. Interesting. I don't hear nobody talking about this. First book of Enoch, reference to lunar reckoning. Look at this. The wide Enochian literature contains a few references to the role of the movements of the luminaries. In the book of Parables, which Nickelberg in his Hermenia commentary on 1 Enoch dated to the late 1st century BCE, one comes across interesting passages that mention curses and blessings in connection with the law of the luminaries. 1 Enoch 41:8 reads, surely the many changes of the sun have both a blessing and a curse, and the course of the moon's path is light to the righteous on the one hand, and darkness to the sinners on the other hand. So, when we read this, 1 Enoch 41:8, where it talks about the lunation of the moon when it's full, the righteous follow it, but when it's dark, the sinners follow it. We start to see this older tradition that's there that would account for why one of the manuscripts actually talks about the full moon starting, going to the dark, and the dark to the full, as opposed to the dark, first physical crescent, to the full, back to the dark. They're hiding the older tradition, but you can see the remnants in the book of Enoch. But if you're not careful to study these things, you're going to overlook it. So we have a problem with this now. Problem with this. Slight problem. All right, let me read this. The book of Jubilees and a reckoning of time. I'm only going to read the goal for time. Jubilee chapter 2, verse 9. It says, and Yahuwah appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and for Shabbats and for months and for feasts and for years and for Shabbats of years and for Jubilees and for all seasons of the year. Jubilee 6, verse 32. And command you, the children of Israel, that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days, and these will constitute a complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its seasons, for everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast. They were very concerned with the calendar and bringing back the preeminence of the sun. They're not neglecting the moon and the stars. They're trying to bring back the sun because their oppressors, the Hellenistic Seleucids, had a Macedonian calendar based off a lunar year coming from Babylon. So now they want to restore the importance of the sun when they go back to what they see in Bereshit, chapter 1, verses 14, verses 18. Cannot have reckoning of time with just the moon and leave out the sun. Can't have the reckoning of time with the moon and the sun and leave out the stars. It's very important because Jubilees was believed to be written later, and the Enochian tradition that we see in the book of Enoch came earlier. So this is actually based off of what the scribe saw in the book of Enoch when he wrote this commentary in regards to the book of Genesis chapter 1, going to Shemot chapter 12, or Exodus chapter 12. So listen to this. If we get down to verse 34, it says, and all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years and will forget the new months and seasons and Shabbats, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the year. So according to this tradition, it said that the reason why this is important because at some point in time, Israel will forget the Menological system, the Pyramidal system, etc. This is why this was crafted as propaganda to encourage the people to include the sun back in its rightful state in regards to the calendrical system. Verse 36 says, for there will be those who will surely make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in year to year 10 days too soon. So they understood that you cannot have a full lunar calendar. See, what they were doing was they were fixing something that was broken, or attempting to fix something that was broken, by writing commentary to ensure the importance of following the sun, or including the sun back to reckoning time. But as we saw in the Enochian calendar, they did not get rid of the stars, and the moon was still reckoned as well. Are you following me? Okay. I don't want to read all of this, but let me just read this last part here. So this has to do with the festivals and jubilees. Again, you get this from calendrical variations, the Second Temple Judaism by Stephanie Solinger, chapter, I'm not sure what chapter it is, but page 112, 113, 114. It says, was this calendar utopian or practical? Talking about Jubilees. The explicit references linking the festival weeks and tabernacles to the agricultural cycle together with the legal pronouncement governing the second time at a specific time of the year militate for the view that the author of the Book of Jubilees considered its calendar to be anything but utopian, which means that they recognize that 364 days is not exact. It's not utopian, it's not perfect, but it's there to teach something because it was in alignment in regards to when the priests that were living around the caves of Qumran would do their particular duties. And this is the calendar they used because they wanted something diametrically opposed to what was done in Jerusalem, because they felt Jerusalem was unclean, because they felt that the priests that were there were in bed with the Greeks and the Romans, and they defiled the temple, and they would defile the land, and they were trying to keep themselves separate. It says clearly, I said the law of the second time was to be observed year to year. Clearly, this would have been impossible if the 364-day year had not been kept in line with the true solar year of 365 and a quarter. The same can be said for every single festival that required an offering of first fruits. It is possible, of course, that 364-day calendar was adhered to for a while until such time as its followers could no longer sustain it with the seasons. In the face of an unbridgeable difference with the agricultural cycle, they had to abandon the practical aspect of the 364 year, which means that this could not be applied literally every year. It's symbolic because it represented something. The goodness was bringing the sun back. Enochian calendar bringing the stars back with the sun. But in regards to following it practically, 364 was a very sacred number to them. If you cannot keep using 364 and think that that calendar is going to align with the solar year or the tropical year, it's going to be off. It's not even going to align with the sidereal year, because after a period of time of just counting 364 solar days, the stars are going to be off with the sun. And we just read in the book of Enoch, the stars have to bring in the sun. So now when this was created, it was created for a propaganda purpose to get the people to come back and pay importance to the statutes, laws, and commandments that speak about the feasts and festivals and the reckoning of time, because Israel will forget these things over time, being in subsequent captivities. It's the captivities that cause Israel to forget these things. And the captivity was a result of our disobedience. Hence why it's difficult to determine time, because we are in the land that's perpetually unclean, because we have Gentiles that's in there. And therefore, it's very difficult for the earth to yield its fruit, because nobody's letting the land rest, or for the stars and for the moon and the sun and the clouds and anything to give its particular depiction of time, because the land is unclean. And Most High said, you have to keep my statutes and commandments in the land, let it rest, keep the land clean, and then I will ensure that the method I give you for reckoning time will be exact each and every year. Okay. So I'm going to read this last part. This argument holds that the proponents of the 364-day year in its Jubilee tradition then use the calendar for purely theoretical purposes. This argument, however, flies in the face of the textual evidence available from Quorum Library, which spans from 20 years and kept the association between the cultic calendar and the agricultural cycle, as will be shown in the following section. So pretty much what this is saying is that 364 days cannot be kept in regards to a full, quote-unquote, year that aligns with the agricultural cycle in regards to the seasons. It was purely theoretical. It was used for a short period of time, but as you will see, there was more than one variant in regards to this Quran calendrical text. It wasn't just one. There's many various manuscripts that happen over periods of time, where different groups or sects that are coming to these caves that are seeing these old Book of Jubilees, old Book of Enoch, and trying to use that to reckon in their time period a new calendrical system. But it had to keep being revised, because you keep being off day after day after day, year after year after year. Okay. In the third part, as identified some previously unknown aspects of the calendrical practice expounded in the Book of Luminaries, notably the existence at some stage in the traditions of conflicting lunar reckoning. These were identified possibly in the midst of a calendrical parliament that centered around the use of the proper lunar reckoning to govern the 364-day year. Immediately, these stand within the 364-day year that accepts the role of the moon in matters calendrical, as expounded by the Book of Syriac, and as illustrated by those documents from the Dead Sea Scrolls corpus that synchronize the 364-day year with lunar observation, and trying to make a synchronization between the moon and the sun. It's important. Be the observation of the lunar phenomenon or recording of periods of lunar visibility. In addition, this third part of our inquiry contributes original arguments that further advance the contemporary discussion concerning the identification and interpretation of the X and DWQ dates and 4Q320, 4Q321, 4Q321A. These are various manuscripts in regard to the calendrical text of Quran. Now let me read this. With regards to this 364-day calendar of the Book of Jubilees, Joburg can be credited with identifying its sabbatical structure as well as its New Year start on the 4th day of the week. Now you'll hear this in regards to people that use the Enochian calendar. This is important. These findings have been largely corroborated by the discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the vicinity of Quran. There is no consensus to date, however, on the question of the antiquity of the 364-day calendar. We don't know how old it is. Joburg suggested that it antedated the book of Ezekiel and therefore may well have antedated the exile in Babylon, because when we read the book of Ezekiel, it has a rendering of time there. And that rendering of time that it has there, you cannot align it with the 364-day calendar. Is that correct, Mr. Stein? All right, that's the point. Look at this. John suggests that this claim must remain hypothetical for the time being, just as Malik's claim that the astronomical work circulating under the name Enoch could probably be dated to the 5th or 6th century BCE. They don't know how old this is. The evidence reviewed here indicates that the 364-day tradition is accounted for in the Second Temple sources from the late 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE. Outside of Judea, the 364-day year tradition was already known in Babylon as early as the 7th or 6th centuries BCE. There's little else that can be ascertained in light of the present state of the knowledge, which would not move into the hypothetical realm. What they're saying is, we're trying to figure out how old is the 364-day calendar. Some people say, well, we've seen remnants of it in Babylon, and if it was in Babylon, Babylonians wasn't really using it because they saw it was ineffective. And if it was used in regards to Israel, how far back? And they say, listen, it didn't go in the pre-exilic Israel state. It happened in Second Temple Judaism, which happened when Israelites went back and rebuilt the temple during the Persian captivity, which means that this calendar in regards to Israel does not go back further than the Second Temple building. That means that something different was going on during the pre-exilic time that changed once we went into captivity. That's important. The Israelites are trying to take this oral history and put it down, but when they try to practically apply it, they see that it's not practical. That's important. We move past that. This talks about variations in the Quran calendrical text. I'll just read this. Today, a growing number of scholars have come to the conclusion that at least 3 or 4 divergent groups who disagreed on a number of halakhic issues are represented among the scrolls from Quran. Halakhic has to do with the rituals that you do each and every day. It says the Yahad, the Temple Scroll group, the 4Q MMT group, and the Enoch and Nastor groups. Experts in religious law, including Lawrence Schiffman and Joseph Bargerton, noticed in irreconcilable, differences between the Temple Scroll and the other Dead Sea Scrolls. The conclusion is the long-standing assumption that the caves represent the doctrine and practice of a single group is no longer accepted. One area where this is clearly seen is in the study of the calendars. This paper has suggested that the calendar system is even more complex than just 2 major systems, having multiple variations and nuances depending upon patterns. So people who say that the 364-year calendar was used consistently by one group at the Dead Sea Scrolls community is inaccurate, because obviously they're not done the textual criticism to look at the various manuscripts to see that there's irreconcilable differences between them, even in regards to the calendar, because you cannot keep a 364-day year and have it consistent with the agricultural cycle, because you need wine, oil, and corn, and other items that were tithes that were brought to the priesthood that lived in Quran, that had to be given to the priest every year. And if you off a day and a day and a day and a day, now the timing in which they're supposed to be given these things is not aligned with the calendrical system that they have established. So they kept seeing that there was issues with this calendar. And if you don't do the textual criticism, you will assume that there's only one group that's there in Quran, and you don't realize there's various manuscripts that say various things, including the lunar reckoning of the waxing to waning and waning to waxing. So what I'm saying is, you have to investigate, because if you don't see that this 364 year in regards to Jubilees and Enoch is off practically. But it did help us by bringing back the sun, the moon, and the stars. More importantly, the sun, and reckoning time, because they're trying to restore an old tradition that was lost. King, you follow me? All right, I know it's a lot, but it's good. I'm going to skip past. Well, let me read this. Please bear with me. Very soon after the publication of John Burke's work, and coincided with a focused scholarly attention towards the new data concerning what John Burke coined the old sacerdotal calendar, scholars rightly pointed out that the 364-day year with this rough 1.5-day discrepancy with the true solar year cannot be kept in line with the seasons, and therefore must have drifted slowly back through the seasons. In the absence of any textual evidence showing how this calendar was kept in line with the seasons, Scholars such as Beckwith suggested that the calendar must have been a construct of the Essene group sometime in the mid-3rd century BCE. By the year 200 BCE or thereabout, the group finally realized, so the argument went that their innovation cannot be kept in line with the seasons. And as a result, they were forced to abandon this ideal calendar. But see, if you don't do the textual criticism, that goes out the window. All right. Now, what about Chag Shavuot? Now, remember I mentioned earlier, I think it was in part 1, where I was talking about the various ways to render when you start to count from the offering of first fruits to Shavuot. Some people say it's the high Sabbath or the holy convocation or the day that you rest. That's within the middle of the week. That's part of what feast? Unleavened bread. When unleavened bread ends, that day can be considered Sabbath, and the day after that is when you start your count. And some people say, well, you start your count with the weekly Shabbat, and then you go start your count. My subscription is to the weekly Shabbat. You start the count from the weekly Shabbat. And evidence of that is here actually in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So remember, when you go through the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a lot of information, but you have to filter that. And what they say here is that this is a 4Q394 section A. Clearly then, although the Quran canonical writings share much in common, they do not march in lockstep. The notable differences show that we are regarding the works of a particular school in these calendars, not those of a single small sect, like I told you before. But here, we see it says, on the 7th of the 3rd month is a Shabbat. On the 14th of the month is the Shabbat, which means that if they got to tell you this particular day in the month, and it varies from year to year, because it told you about various years, that means that you had a lunar reckoning with the solar year. Because the lunar reckoning is where you have your counts of 14, 15, etc. Okay? It says here, on the 15th of the month is the festival of weeks. On the 21st of the month is a Shabbat. On the 28th of the month is a Shabbat. The month continues with the day after the Shabbat, the second day, and as an additional day. This completes the season, 91 days. Again, if y'all get any books on the Dead Sea Scrolls, look at 4Q394, and it will tell you they started the count for the festival of weeks after the weekly Shabbat. The day after, or the morrow after the weekly Shabbat, you start your count. And we see this tradition here in the Dead Sea Scrolls, all right? We're moving forward, we're almost there. All right, Roman rule of Judea. Y'all can go back and do research on that. Let's get past that. The Julian calendar. Now, when Rome emerged as a world power, difficulties of making a calendar were well known, but the Romans complicated their lives because of their superstition that even numbers weren't lucky. Hence, their months were 29 and 31 days long, with the exception of February, which had 28 days. However, 4 months of 31 days, 7 months of 29 days, and 1 month of 20 days added up to only what? Therefore, the Romans invented an extra month called Mercedonius of 22 or 23 days. It was added every second year. This is part of the Julian calendar. Even with the Mercedonius, the Roman calendar eventually became so far off that Julius Caesar, advised by the astronomer Sosigenes, ordered a sweeping reform. In 46 BCE, was made 445 days long by imperial decree, bringing the calendar back in step with the seasons. Then the solar year, with the value of 365 days and 6 hours, was made the basis of the calendar. The months were 30 and 31, so they had to leave the superstition alone, they was throwing the calendar off, in length, and to take care of the 6 hours every 4th year was made a 366-day year, which we have today. You have remnant of that today, Moreover, Caesar decreed the year began with the 1st of January, not with the vernal equinox in the late March. Interesting. His calendar was named the Julian calendar after Julius Caesar, and it continues to be used by Eastern Orthodox churches for holiday calculations to this day. However, despite the correction, the Julian calendar is still 11.5 minutes longer than the actual solar year, and after a number of centuries, and even 11.5 minutes adds up, which means it continues to throw the years off, which goes to show that even the Julian calendar itself, which was a huge reform that was spread out throughout the Roman Empire, still needed adjustments. I just want to show you that, so that the reason why I'm showing you this history of the background is so that you can see the calendar system that's being imposed upon the locals, which was more specifically the Israelites, and what they had to deal with. Because if you don't understand the history behind that, nothing else I say to you makes sense. Philo of Alexandria, commentary on the Israelite Menology. This is important. He says here, another suggestion made by the interpreters of the Holy Scriptures is that food, when unleavened, is a gift of nature, when leavened is a work of art. For men, in their eagerness to temper the barely necessary with the pleasant, have learned through practice to soften my art what nature has made hard. Since then, the springtime feast, as I've laid down, is a reminder of the creation of the world and its early inhabitants, children of the earth in the first or second generation, must have used the gifts of the universe in their unperverted state before pleasure had gotten the mastery. He ordained for use on this occasion the food most fully in accordance with the season. So he's making a reckoning that Chag HaMatzot, which has to do with the bread, feast of unleavened bread, is in alignment with the springtime feast, and it has some connection with creation. And this is what he's saying, because remember, Philos of Alexandria was very Hellenistic, and he was also influential to quote-unquote the Brit Hadashah or the New Testament. When you go on to study his philosophy behind the Logos, you'll see how that ended up in Yachanan chapter 1. Okay, just do some research on that, all right? He says here, for the offering of first fruits. But within the feast, there's also another feast directly after the first day. This is called a sheaf, a name given to it from the ceremony, which consists in bringing to the altar a sheaf as a first fruit, both of the land which has been given to the nation to dwell in, and of the whole earth, so that it serves the purpose both to the nation in particular and for the whole human race in general. That's the offering of first fruits. So he's making a mentioning of the offering of first fruits, a mentioning of the feast of unleavened bread. The feast, which is held when the number 50 is reached, has acquired the title of first products. On it, it is the custom to bring 2 leavened loaves of wheaten bread, for a sample offering of that kind as the best form of food. One explanation of the name Feast of First Products is that the first produce of the young wheat and the earliest fruit to appear is brought as a sample offering before the year's harvest comes to be used by men. Shavuot. The second moral is that after all the fruits are made perfect, it is our duty to thank Elohim who brought them to perfection and is the source of all good things. For autumn, after its fruitage, is, as also the name clearly implies, the season after the ripe fruit has been gathered in, and when the sown crops and the fruit trees have paid their annual toll and burden tribute. It has to do with the feast of ingathering. The people are commended during the time of the feast to dwell in tents. The reason for this may be that the labor of the husbandman no longer requires that they should live in the open air, as nothing is now left unprotected, but all the fruits are stored up in silos or similar places to escape the damage, which also ensures that the blazing sunshine or storms of rain have Sukkot. So what he's saying here, and again, follow as a historian, I use history to show you how they still kept Feast of Unleavened Bread outside of the scriptures. They still kept the offering of the first fruits outside of the scriptures, and still kept Shavuot. They still kept the Feast of Ingathering, which is intertwined with Chag HaSukkot. So these things were still being kept, even without a text. So if we was to look at history and we didn't have the scriptures, we see that our people still kept these feasts and festivals even up until Philo's time. Huh? Okay. So one more historian, Flavius Josephus, commentary on the Israelite Menology, in the month of Zacchaeus, which is with us called Nisan, and begins the year. Nisan begins the year, that's Abib. On the 14th day by what? Lunar reckoning, the sun begins where? In Aries. So during his time period, he would see for the sidereal year that the constellation Aries would be the background constellation to bring in the sun during the vernal equinox. But today, you don't see that. Today, it's what constellation? Begins with a P. Pisces. So we were just fixating our attention to what was written as opposed to what's going on today. Then we would assume that we're looking for Aries to bring in the sun when the vernal equinox is here. And when we see it don't happen, we're like, well, hold on, what's going on? This is why you have to understand a little bit of astronomy to see how these things are shifting. So that way you can adapt and modify according to this present day and time. Okay? Our lawgiver, seeing that in this month we were delivered from bondage to the Egyptians, ordained that we should year by year offer the same sacrifice, which, as I've already said, we offered then on departure from Egypt, the sacrifice called Pesach. On the 15th, the Passover was followed up by the festival of unleavened bread, lasting 7 days. So we have the 15th day, unleavened bread, 7 days, Chag HaMatzot. And it says, and after this is that they may publicly or privately reap their harvest, the offering of first fruits. The 15th day of the 7th month, when the season of the year is changing for winter, we have Chag HaSukkot. So historically, Josephus also speaks about how we reckon time in regards to the feasts and festivals. We have Nisan, or Abib, bringing in the year on the 14th day by lunar reckoning, using the sun and the stars and the moon. 3 elements that we have to utilize in order to determine time, so we can fixate it to the agricultural cycle, which then is aligned to the Moedim on regards to the social gatherings in regards to the feasts and festival days. Cain, Khan.
Oh.
I'm not gonna go over this. You can read up the Judean Roman wars. Pretty much what I was showing this is to show you that in 70 CE they destroyed the temple. Israelites were kicked out the land, right? Now we got a big issue now because we're not in the land to see the harvest, to see the animals, to see all the other stuff. Causes a problem. But then the Israelites are fully exposed from out the land during the Bar Kokhba revolt, and that happened in 132 to 136 CE. Go back and research this. And these things are important because once the Israelites are kicked out of the land, it poses a new challenge in regards to determining time. Because they're not Israel no more. All right, we move forward. All right, this is very important because we almost towards the end. Somebody give me a time count. Well, I got my watch here. 2:55. Okay, so I got about 30 minutes. All right. Abu Rahan Muhammad ibn Ahmad al-Biruni of the Maccabean lunar reckoning. Does anybody know who the Maccabeans are? Never heard of them, right? Never heard of them. Most people haven't heard of them, but I had to dig deep. Now look at this. Abu Isa al-Warraq reports in his Kitab al-Makalat on the kind of Jews called the Maghariba, who allege that feasts are not legal save when the moon rises. The moon rises what? Full on the night of Wednesday, i.e. the night following Tuesday's sunset, and that it would have to be in the land of the Israelites. This is the beginning of the new year for them. So the new year is tied to when the moon rises full. Interesting. From this, the days and months are counted. What? Full moon, beginning of the year, the days and months are counted, and according to it, the cycle of feasts begins. Their reason for this is that Elohim, the Exalted One, created the two major luminaries on Wednesday. So we see even this teaching for those who subscribe to the Enochian calendar. But the important thing here is the two luminaries, the moon rising full, having to do some connection with the new year, the days and months being counted, and according to it, the feast. So the full moon is responsible for assisting with helping to bring in the new year, counting the days and months in regard to the feast. And this had to, I think this goes back to about 1000 AD. There's still a remnant of Israelites that are keeping an old tradition. Again, we gotta look at all the data and try to recompile what's there. But let me move forward. Okay. Yaqub al-Kiryat Isani and the Maccabean lunar reckoning. The Maccabeans fixed the beginning of the months by the appearance of the full moon. They fixed the beginning of months by the appearance of the full moon. They adduce certain reasons in support of this. We shall mention them when we come to the discourse on the beginning of months and their indications. They think that Elohim, may his praise be great, created all things perfect and complete in the first moments of creation. He created the body of each of the two luminaries, i.e. the sun and the moon, along with the stars, according to the utmost degree of their possible perfection. As proof that the moon was created perfect and complete, they offer the text, as the moon remains forever. Psalms 89:38. And thus, as the world was created perfect and whole, the moon was also created perfect at the moment when it was created. Furthermore, they said that the Bible calls the two luminaries at the time of their creation the large one, Genesis 1:16. This, they say, took place on Wednesday, and there is no doubt in their minds that this was the first day of the month, and that they, i.e. the sun and the moon, were created at the limit of their size, since he calls them the two large ones. When the moon is full, it is the largest and greatest, and thus we know that when it is full, that day is the first day of the month. Okay, so the tradition is still there, but it's starting to become the minority voice. So first we see some of it covered up in the Quran caves, and then eventually it started to become the minority voice. But we get in there. Almost done. All right. Links between the people behind the Dead Sea Scrolls and the sect of the Maccabeans have been suggested. It is possible that the Maccabeans and the Qumrites appeared on the scene in Judea around the same time, just like it is possible that these two groups belong to different periods. Be that as it may, the fact that the calendar followed by the Maccabeans should start on Wednesday, the fourth day of creation, and should indicate that Passover was celebrated only on a Wednesday, two particular characteristics shared with the fourth day of creation, and should indicate that Passover was celebrated only on a Wednesday. Two particular characteristics shared with the 364-day year calendar of the Dead Sea Scrolls would suggest some strong similarities between their calendar and that followed by the Essenes, and expounded in the calendrical and Mismarot documents found in the vicinity of the Dead Sea. The location in Jericho of the cave where the Maccabean writings were found renders the association even more plausible. What this is saying is that, remember we learned about the old tradition, about the full moon, lunar reckoning? Well, they're saying that these Megarians that we just said says the months start when the moon is full. They possibly have came from a sect or older sect that was actually also at the Dead Sea Scrolls. So now we see this old tradition is still alive with these Megarians, and they still have some similarities to some of the sects at the Dead Sea Scroll community in regards to having Wednesday starting the Passover. This is important. And the only way they can determine Passover being on the Wednesday if there's already a pre-existing foreign calendar that you're fixing Passover onto. Because without this foreign calendar, Israelites was in their own independent sovereign state. They didn't have to worry about fixating Passover on a particular day because they didn't have another calendar that they were subservient to.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
This is important. All right, too far. All right. Now, we almost at the end. This is good. Second Temple Greco-Roman era calendar reckoning by the Sanhedrin Council. After destructing the temple, Yavne became the spiritual center of the people and the secret of its survival. Rabban Yochanan ben Sakai reorganized the Sanhedrin, which fixed the date of each new month and the time of each leap year. From Yavne, he sent instructions to the scattered Jewish communities in matters of law and observance, and Jews from all over the diaspora turned to Yavne for answers and advice. Without any formal declaration and without the immediate participation of the leading scholars of the generation, Yavne became the new center of the Jewish people. When the Sanhedrin proclaimed at the beginning of a new month, messengers were sent out to the more remote communities, and fire signals were used to communicate the news to the Jews in Babylonia. And deliberating on whether to add a month to the year, the Sanhedrin considered whether bad weather would prevent the far-flung exiles from arriving in Jerusalem in time for Pesach pilgrimage, which is the Haggai. And look, there's a book here called Wheel of Stars, the Ancient Biblical Calendar of the Future by Andrew Gabriel Roth. The Jewish calendar was put into its present form over 1,600 years ago. Until 359 CE, the Sanhedrin functioned in Jerusalem as a supreme judicial body in Jewish life. Now, when we go to the Torah, do we have a Sanhedrin in Torah? And if we do, who's the Sanhedrin? The Levites. The Levites will be the council that people will go to and matters will be brought forth, right? But this is something that is a formulation of Second Temple Judaism when the Israelites are out of the land, which is something that is similar to what we see in the Torah, but it's something totally different because the Sanhedrin also became a political body, which means that you didn't always have to be a Levite to be part of this council. Okay. It was a Sanhedrin through a special calendar council called Sud Hal-Idbar, it literally secreted the calendar intercalation that decided when a leap year would occur and whether the month Hesban or Kislev should be 29 or 30 days. So now we see that it is the Sanhedrin that's responsible for this timing in regards to when the calendar should be wrought. This is important because this is man putting his hands in everything, okay? And I'm not gonna end off with this, but this is towards the end because I'm gonna end off with the calendar scheme, understanding who Rabbi Hillel II. Does anybody know who this person is? Raise your hand. Because everybody in here should raise their hand, because if you don't know who this is, then you don't know a huge portion of people that follow the Bible follow his mathematical formula in regards to the calendrical system. And if you don't know who he is and don't know why he did what he did, then you don't know the reason why you're following a particular calendar system today. There's people or Jews, so-called Jews or Jews, that still follow the lunar reckoning. And there's so-called Jews, because remember, before Israel was a state, what year was Israel made a state? Before 1948. This thing was in use the way it was in use because the Israelites were scattered abroad and they was not in the land. But in 1948, so-called Jews made their way there, and other Jews who Operation Moses, etc., was brought into the land, and now they began the FVC again, the first visible crescent from Jerusalem to determine time, and they created a new Sanhedrin council. But before then, this council, yes, you want to say something?
I was going to say, is this in effect of what Ashkenazi Jews say?
Yes, there you go.
So they go by the crescent moon, which is not our original.
Oh yeah, there you go. You wasn't here last week, right? But you catching up.
No, I listened.
Oh, you did? Oh, see, she got prepared for what she got here today. So, all right, I want to ask some good questions. I'm going to read this to you because this right here, again, I went through the Enochian calendar, the Jubilee tradition. I showed you where the first visible crescent came from, the vernal equinox usage and starting the time. I showed you the dark moon situation. Now we're going to see how the quote-unquote Jews of today started to follow the calendar they have today. It came from this guy. So I'm going to read some of this, but I want you to go back and research Rabbi Hillel II, okay? Hillel II Nazi, which means prince, the son of Judah, Neziah, and grandson of Gamaliel the fourth. And we heard this name before in the Berit Hadashah, right? After the crushing of the revolt of the Jews against the Emperor Gallus and his commander Ursinus, in 352 CE, which resulted in the destruction of many Jewish communities, right? Which was Sepphoris Tiberius, which is important because a Tiberian vocalization system occurred from the Pharisees that aggregated in the area of Tiberian. That's very important, but you can research that, right? And Lydia. New decrees were issued against the internal authority of the communities and also against the observance of Judaism. The Roman government aspired to limit the privileges of the Nazi, the prince, and the freedom of action of the Sanhedrin in Tiberias. Because of the serious condition of the communities of Erez or Arat, Israel, and the deterioration of the Galilean center, Hillel II agreed in principle to limit the authority of the Nazi and its functions in connection with the proclamation of the new moon, the fixing of festivals, and the intercalation of the year. Now, we have a situation where the Jews are established, they have a Sanhedrin, the Romans saying, listen, we don't like these Jews multiplying, teaching, having all this influence. So we're going to start telling them, yo, y'all need to change this up, divide things out. If not, we're going to have an issue with you. So now Hillel II, Rabbi Hillel II came on the scene and said, okay, look, we're gonna take away a lot of the function from the Nazi, the prince that's ruling this area. We're going to remove a lot of his power in regards to proclaiming the new moon, fixing the festivals, and the intercalation of the year. He thereupon published the Sud Hadber, the secret of intercalation, and the Ke'evi Uta Der Yadha, with the fixing of the new month, according to a tradition mentioned by Haggayon and quoted in the Sefer HaIber of Abraham Bar Hia. And you can see this in Filipowski, 1851-97, which is the reference. This took place in 358 CE. Keep that in mind. Important too is the testimony of Nahmanides, which is known as Ramban, in the Sefer of HaSukkot, from the time of Hillel in the year 670 of the Seleucid era, which is our 358 CE. The Sanhedrin in Eretz Israel ceased, and it ceased to have experts, and it was he who regulated the order of intercalation, reckoned the years, and fixed them up for generations to come. Who? Rabbi Hillel II. Some regard the year 344 as that in which the new calendar was introduced, and it is possible that it was not immediately publicized to the same degree in all localities. The opinion has been expressed that Hillel II was not the original creator of the fixed calendar, but that it was the result of centuries of development which aimed at achieving a perfected system of fixing the calendar. Remember, who started the fixation of the calendar? The Babylonians. Babylonians also started the new month reckoning, having to do with looking at the BC, first sliver of light, right? Then the fixing of festivals is based on that new moon situation, and the intercalation, when the lunar year is falling behind the solar year, the tropical year. Again, these things are coming from Babylon, and what he's doing was to prevent the destruction of the Israelites that was in the land from the Romans. He decided to, hey, you know what, let's create a system so that we can determine time without being in the land, because we may get split up, we may get destroyed, but we're going to have a mathematical formula on how to depict time. That is not nowhere in Torah at all. That's man's doing, because they wanted to retain their tradition that they had when the Sanhedrin was great within Jerusalem and also in Babylon. This is very, very important. That's why history is important. You got to listen to this. So I'm going to read, I'm not going to read the second part here. I'm just going to read the goal. But I'm going to read this here to you because I want you to see how he created this system, okay? In anticipation of what could happen as far as the Roman emperors persecuted Judaism, Hillel II decided to ensure that the nation could function without the Sanhedrin. They were responsible for the 2-3 witnesses looking for the first visible crescent, announcing the new moons, the feasts, the festival, agricultural cycles. They were responsible for that. He did this to preserve the unity of the nation, to ensure that all Jews throughout the world celebrated the feast on the same day. He decided to publish a calendar. Hillel II based his calendar on the calculations that were already in use from Babylon to anticipate the sighting of the moons. With this calendar, Hillel formally sanctified all months in the leap years. Look at this. The calendar standardized the length of months at 29 days, 12 hours, 793 parts. Thus, a month is 29 days, haser defective, or 30 days full. It also calculates the addition of months over the course of a 19-year cycle. You get this from Babylon and also from the Greek Metonic cycle. This allows for the lunar calendar to realign with the solar years. Adar the 2nd, the 13th month, is added to the 3rd, 6th, 8th, 11th, 14th, 17th, and 19 years of the cycle. Common years, 12 months, have 353, 354, 355 days, and leap years, 13 months, have 383, 384, 385. We take these numbers and you fill it into these blanks here, you start to see how they were trying to realign the solar calendar with the lunar calendar. The effect of these variations is the variation in the length of the months of Heshon and Kislev. The calendar uses the first of Tishri. The calendar uses the first of Tishri to calculate the start of the new year. That's not scriptural. Okay. The day that the conjunction of the moon of Tishri happens determined the start of the new year. The second also decided to introduce some expectations of his calendar. These rules make it easy for the Jewish people to keep the traditions of the Sabbath. The rabbis refer to these rules as postponements or dihiyot. Elul II introduced these postponements to ensure that, one, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippurim, should not be on Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, and the seventh day of Tabernacles, Sukkot, should not be on Saturday. Listen to this. This was to ensure that the Day of Atonement, a fast day, is not preceded or succeeded by a Sabbath. Now, do we have this particular precept in Torah? I don't see that there, but okay. This would extend the fast to 2 days if it falls on Friday, as people would not be able to prepare food. The same reasoning with the seventh day of Sukkot, as the eighth day is a Shabbat. Thus, the purpose of these rules is to manipulate the calendar to ensure that they would avoid having 2 Shabbats in a row. This is made more important for them due to all the halakha that surrounds the preparation for and keeping of the Shabbat. This is the halakha law came later on through oral tradition or oral customs and laws. Elul II thus added an extra tradition to safeguard the existing traditions. Tradition is the key there, not scripture. Okay, I'm gonna read the goal. This is a lot. I'm just gonna read the goal. So I want to run through this. It says here, after the conquest of Jerusalem, the Babylonians introduced their cyclic calendar and the reckoning of their regnal years from Nisan 1 about the spring equinox. The Jews had a finite calendar year with a New Year's Day, and they adopted the Babylonian month names, which they continue to use. In the religious calendar, the commencement of the month was determined by the observation of the crescent new moon, and the date of Passover was tied in with the ripening of barley, which is still good to use. The actual witnessing of the new moon and observing of the stand of crops in Judea were required for the function of the religious calendar. Visual observation of the new moon eventually was supplanted, and toward 200 CE, in fact, supplanted by the secret astronomical calculation that we read earlier. To preserve the unity of Israel, Patriarch Elul II in 358-59 CE published The Secret of Calendar Making, which essentially consisted of the use of the Babylonian 19-year cycle with some modifications required by Jewish ritual. I'm just showing you an overview here because it's showing you the roots, the stems, and then the leaves that we have today. A lot of times we don't see the root, but you see the stem, the branch, and the leaves, and we think that's all the tree. It's not. The calendar, thus, is schematic and independent of the true new moon. The number of days in the year varies. The number of days in a synodic month multiplied by 12 in a common year and by 13 in a leap year would yield fractional figures. Thus, in order to prevent the Day of Atonement, which we read earlier, from falling on Friday or Sunday, and the Assembly of Tabernacles from falling on a Saturday, the new year must avoid commencing on Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Again, this is only your concern if you're forcing an old tradition onto a foreign calendar. If you get rid of that foreign calendar, you don't have to do all this fixation and stuff like that. You don't need to do these things. Okay. The present Jewish calendar is mainly based on the more accurate value of 365 days, 5 hours, 55 minutes, 57 seconds, in excess of the true tropical year by 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Thus, it is advanced by 1 day and about 228 years with regard to equinox. Last line. To a far greater extent than the solar cycle of 28 years, the Jewish calendar employs, as mentioned above, a small or lunar cycle, Mazor Katan, of 19 years, adjusting the lunar months to the solar years by intercalations. Again, all of this stuff is man-made. Passover on Nisan 14 is not to begin before the spring Tekufa, and so the intercalary month is added after Adar. Y'all can go back and research this, right? But I'm going to sum it up. The Mazor Katan is akin to the Metonic cycle described above. The Metonic cycle comes from the Greeks. So what this is saying is, now we have an old tradition that we got from Babylon, and we're trying to fix it onto the quote-unquote Julian calendar. This is before the Gregorian calendar. And we're trying to set it up so that way we got to add these extra rules so that Day of Atonement and Tabernacles don't fall on certain days of the week to interfere with the preparation and halakhic law with the Shabbat And then we have an intercalation, which we got from Babylon, the new moon signing, which we got from Babylon, and we've created all of this system in regards to a cycle of 90 years that involves intercalations of a daughter second every 3 years and every other odd years that we see, because we have to create a system so that way it can be compatible with the new calendar of the day. They're not going back to Torah and looking how the Most High had his own scheme in there. Man is creating his own method because he wanted to be authority over the times, days, seasons, and years, and not Torah. Yes.
Would you have some sort of insight onto how that would skew, not really have insight, but how would that set off what we actually do as people? You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, we're gonna get there. That throws everything off.
yeah.
Because the model I'm about to give you has nothing to do with all of that stuff. You don't have to do all the calculation, all this math. You ain't gonna do none of that. Because the scriptures give you a much easier and simplistic way of determining time without having the Sahedrin, without having the Hillel calendar, without having the Enochian calendar. There's other things that you can use to determine time, and I'm going to show you back to the simplistic formula on how to do so, all right? And that's going to answer your question. I'll get to the end. A modern Sahedrin committee. Look at this. A modern Sahedrin committee attempting to upgrade the calculations for the Jewish calendar. So now we have a Sahedrin that is established in Israel that's trying to mathematically modify Hillel's calendar to the Gregorian calendar of today. They're still touching things and doing all types of stuff. But I want you to go back and look up this committee, the Sahedrin Council. I'm just going to read these 3 parts here, not all of this, but actually, yeah. A special court has been established to accept evidence concerning the signing of the new moon as required by Jewish law. This court is made up of various justices who are assembled to hear evidence as the opportunity permits. The purpose of the court is to increase awareness, develop skills, and resolve galactic issues that arise when determining the Jewish calendar according to testimony by witnesses. Now, are these people Levites?
No.
Hey. It should be noted that the mathematical calendar of Hillel II has been in use since 359 and has functioned for approximately 600 years without difficulty. However, in recent years, a situation has been created where more and more frequently the onset of spring does not coincide with calendar currently in use. This means that the calendar is beginning to drift noticeably, albeit the rate of drift is very slow, much slower than other lunar calendars, such as the Islamic calendar. However, if continued unchecked, we will be celebrating Pesach in the summer rather than the spring. Our current calendar will exceed galactically acceptable limits, and we will be celebrating biblically commanded holidays at times other than when scripture requires to be accepted. There's a requirement from Torah that Pesach come out 2 weeks after the first new moon. I don't know where they got that from, but okay. Of the spring. The first day of spring, according to the solar calendar, is always March 21st. That's not what's true, because sometimes it may vary to March 20th, March 19th, sometimes March 22nd. You have these 4 different days because then you have the leap year that resets the cycle. The Jewish calendar has a discrepancy of about 1 day every century. This means that by year 6000, Pesach will come about 2 new moons after the first day of spring. The Nazi was one of the first poskim to bring up this question about 150 years ago. It goes to say that others said this will become a halakhic question that will eventually require the reestablishment of the Sahedrin to universally authorize a change in the calendar. Again, man is getting his hand involved again in a fixing time. I don't do with Torah. Has to do with improving Hillel's calendar, which was also based off a Babylonian tradition and custom. Public participation, whoever sees a new moon is invited to come out and give their report at 8 Beersheba Street, Jerusalem. Please call the court, blah, blah, blah. They talk about their justices, their legal rulings. All of these rulings they did from 2008 all the way to 2009, as far as sightings of the moon, etc. And they're using this data to modify this old calendar system, which they're saying is still drifting. And I'm going to skip past that. But the reason why this is important is I'm trying to show you that man is still trying to fix a system that is trying to superimpose itself on a modern calendar that has no root in the, in the Torah.
I'm just curious now.
Yes.
When you say man is, coming and doing things.
Yes.
Are we doing this still today since the Most High said don't do it in the place that you choose? Don't do it in the place that I chose.
Yes.
In Jerusalem. Now, we see in the book of Acts, they still coming up.
Mm-hmm.
They have different time frames where they live, but they still all met in Jerusalem.
Yes.
At the same time.
Yes.
So are we following man-made traditions by doing this in the place that we're choosing as Gentile nation?
That's a good question. What I would say to is this: in looking at the Passover letter, right? Passover was written about 419 BCE, and it was by Israelites that were living in Elephantine in Egypt. They were not in the land. And when they were in Elephantine, Egypt, they sent a letter to Jerusalem trying to find out the instructions to keep Passover outside the land because they couldn't commute to the land. Now, when we look at what's called the documentary hypothesis, which has to do with the way that you textually criticize the Torah, we see that the book of Deuteronomy was established sometime during this Persian captivity. So if the tradition, the oral tradition came from Babylon, we left Babylon, Persia told us we can go back and rebuild the temple. We're bringing this tradition. We're rewriting Devarim so that way it can apply to the layman and they can understand. The issue is now are we saying that all the Israelites have to come to Jerusalem, or is something being established that if they're in their locales, they can still keep Passover? So we have evidence during that period of time, which goes back earlier than any manuscript of the scriptures that we have, where Israelites are keeping Passover outside of the land and outside of the place where the Most High chooses, which means that Passover itself, over a period of time, has lost its essence because of Israel's disobedience. So now we have a situation where no matter where we are, even if we go back to Israel, the land is still unclean. You have Gentiles walking up on there. They have all types of festivals and craziness. The land is still perpetually unclean. So if you try to go back to Jerusalem to try and still keep Passover, guess what? The land is still unclean. And you can't keep Passover if the land is unclean. Yes. Yes, because it's an ethnic marker, so that way the goyim or the nation can identify who the children of Israel is. Because in the feasts and festivals themselves, it's a reminder of what the Most High has done with our forefathers and what He's going to do to us in the future when the Mashiach comes on the scene. So it makes us distinct from all of the nations, because the nations will celebrate July 4th, Christmas, Easter. And if we just say, you know what, we can't keep those festivals, I might as well go and buy a Christmas tree, might as well get some presents. What makes us distinct from the goyim and other nations, so that way they identify the work of the Most High within us and amongst our communities that will drive them to follow that which we follow, which is the Most High. There you go. Because it can't be required now if we live in an unclean place. It's impossible, right? But it's a way of us keeping our custom, our tradition from our forefathers, letting the world know when they see us keep Sukkot. Well, why you keep Sukkot? Now we can open up the text and we can reason with them. It's an ethnic marker to retain our identity, because it's a reminder of what our forefathers, what the Most High did with our forefathers, and what He's going to do in the future. So like you said, it's a commemoration, it's a memorial, it's an ethnic marker so the world can identify us as the children of the Most High. All right? Yes.
Unlike our Levitical priests at that time that we had on the Hebrew calendar, they were going strictly off of spiritual for the Most High, right? Whereas these people are going on political more so rather than spiritual.
Yes, and the political was also influenced by the captors at the time. Because now remember, because if you've seen the second part, I talked about how Babylon influenced the Israelites and how we were adopting their traditions. In order to be prosperous, we had to adopt the calendrical system. Their worship of the moon god sin would have to do with the crescent and all these other things. So these influences came upon us if we were attempting to be prosperous in foreign captivity. So we started to lose a lot of our older traditions, and we started to adopt newer traditions because that was the only way for us to be economically prosperous. And what was the second one you wanted to say? Yes.
It's still because we're doing what morals, we're doing this as remembrance and also as a sign so we can keep track of what's really supposed to happen when we should up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is that we do have to be sure that we're doing 100% towards what we should be doing.
Exactly.
Because even though we're doing this as like signs and other things, we still have to give 100%.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
So this is really good. I'm really learning so much.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but I do want to keep 100%.
Yeah. As much as you can. Exactly. See, that's the thing. Well, the method I'm showing you is a way you can do it no matter where you at, because when the calendar was given to Enoch, Jerusalem wasn't established with Israelites. So look, listen to this. If people are keeping Enochian calendar, you can't just specify or localize it just to Israel. If Enoch gave it to his 3 sons and they spread all around the world. Okay. Some of y'all get that at midnight. But anyway, but again, let's say the Enochian calendar was ideal. We got to remember that was during the antediluvian period or antediluvian period. Does anybody know what antediluvian means? Before the flood. So before the flood, the earth had a different shape and form than after the flood, because the heavens opened up and the rain came out and the fountain of the deep came up. So you're altering the lithosphere of the crust and also the atmosphere, so that way things are shifted a little bit different than it was initially before the flood. So if a calendar was instituted of 364 over time, there will be a difference because there's a decaying of the earth. The earth is breaking down. It's not designed to stay the way it is forever because of sin. And the Most High has to renovate it. So therefore, over time, if this calendar was pristine, then throughout the various generations and locales of people that had it, they're going to adopt it based on their locale or location and based on the observances of what's going on in the earth, because that will determine how you determine time. So let me get through this. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. I promise you I'm almost done. The Gregorian calendar. Caesar's calendar was consisted of 11 months of 30, 31, and 28 days, which is in February, extended to 29 days every fourth year, was actually quite accurate. It erred from the real solar calendar by only 11.5 minutes a year. After centuries, though, even a small inaccuracy like this adds up. By the 16th century, it had put the Julian calendar behind the solar 1 by 10 days. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII ordered the advancement of the calendar by 10 days and introduced a new corrective device to curb further error. Century years such as 1700, 1800 would no longer be counted as leap years unless they were like 1600 or 2000 divisible by 400. That's the new mathematical equation. If somewhat inelegant, this system is undeniably effective and is still in official use in the United States. The Gregorian calendar year differs from the solar year by only 26 seconds. Accurate enough for most mortals, since this only adds up to 1 day's difference every 3,328 years. And even when this happens, this has to be a new adjustment because you will be off some time. Again, when man has his hand in trying to fixate time, he will always be off. But if we use the method the Most High gives us, you will never be off. But let's move forward. All right. Now, this is the last part. Only a few slides. This right here. Can somebody read that? What does it say?
Internal biological clock rewiring.
What is your biological clock? Internal biological clock. Somebody? Yes.
Is it going up to circadian rhythm?
There you go. Okay.
Of course, you sleep and you're up and
Oh, yeah, she good. She good.
it's hard to be.
Now, no, it's good. Because if your day starts at night and ends during the day, as opposed to your day starting in the day and ending at night, it's going to affect your internal biological clock rewiring. If you have Christmas on a certain day every year, it's going to affect your biological clock rewiring. You don't think, oh, Christmas is coming, December 25th, it's winter, it's going to snow, get gifts. It's going to change your internal biological clock rewiring. If your parents are predisposed to this while the child's in the womb, epigenetically, when they come out, they're going to be adopting the things from their parents and from what they see on TV and in this world. It's going to affect your internal biological clock rewiring. They're using a Gregorian calendar each and every day of your life. It's going to affect your internal biological clock rewiring. You're going to go to the circadian rhythm, go to melatonin, your day-night cycle. It's going to affect everything. So the calendar is so important that if you don't adjust it, it will internally rearrange your entire reworking of your pineal gland, of the circadian rhythm, of the synapses in your brain that sends communications that tell you how to wake, and it sends signals to the other cells of your body, let them know when to be active, at what times during the day. The calendar is so potent that if I control the calendar, I control your internal biological clock rewiring and also the whole physiological makeup that creates you. Because now you'll be going according to my customs, my feasts, my festivals, and not what the Most High ordains for you. That's daylight saving order. That's serious. See, some people don't think it's a big deal, but this is why people have a hard time readjusting. Readjust. Bad enough, I'm a night person. Bad enough, I'm a night person. Maybe that's in there for some reason. I don't know. All I'm saying is, but I know I have to get up and I got to do stuff the next day. And I know 12 a.m. midnight starts the next day. 6 a.m. is the supposed day of the rising of the sun. But let's get into this real quick. I want y'all to read something, right? I got this from NCBI, which is the National Institute of Health.gov. This is a very good site if you want to look at scientific articles, right? It's peer-reviewed and everything. It's a great site. But I want to read this for you, right? This talks about melatonin, nature's most versatile biological signal. Listen to this. Melatonin is exclusively involved in signaling the time of day and the time of year, hence considered to help both clock and calendar functions to all tissues, and is thus considered the body's chronological pacemaker or Zeitgeber. So what is that saying? That means whatever calendar you're following, that's affecting the amount of melatonin in your system, whether it's in excess, whether it's a limited supply, is also affecting your time of day, your time of year cycle, and is the one regulating the internal clock and even your external calendrical functions. So all the tissues in your body, is affected by a calendar system. Okay, I'm not even gonna get into all this. That is really heavy. One day you're gonna get this. You'll go back and read this and say, you know what? Wow, this is why I can adjust to a new calendar. There's so much work and training. Sister back here does fitness. I don't want to say Nick, I don't know if you want to be on camera or not, but she does fitness. And when you do fitness, you understand that you have to get almost every organ in your body in a perfect alignment so that way externally your body can follow suit. But if your whole internal clock is changed, that's going to affect every organ in your body, which will then affect your perception externally. And again, the calendar that we're using today was not designed by the Most High. So when we follow it, we follow after somebody else's agenda. I'm going to read just a little bit of this. I'm not going to go too much here, but the sleep-wake cycle is regulated by two separate biological mechanisms in the body which interact together and balance each other. The first model, first posited by Swiss sleep researcher Alexander Borbely in the early 1980s, is often referred to as a two-process model of sleep-wake regulation. The two processes are the circadian rhythm, also known as process C, the regulation of the body's internal processes and alertness levels, including the circadian drive for arousal and circadian alerting system, which is governed by the internal biological or circadian clock. Sleep-wake homeostasis, or process S, the accumulation of hypogenic sleep-inducing substances in the brain, which generates a homeostatic sleep drive. Both of these processes are influenced to some extent by the genes of an individual. In addition, various external factors, food, drugs, ambient temperature, meal times, naps, stress, exercise, daily schedules, alarm clocks, etc., can also have a direct or indirect effect on an individual's sleep-wake cycle. The body's built-in circadian clock, which is centered in the hypothalamus, organ in the brain, is the main mechanism that controls the timing of sleep and is independent of the amount of preceding sleep or wakefulness. The internal clock is coordinated with the day-night, light-dark cycle over a 24-hour period and regulates the body's sleep patterns, feeding patterns, core body temperature, brainwave activity, cell regeneration, hormone production, and other biological activities. Even a long sleep might be ineffective or least efficient if it occurs at the wrong time of their circadian cycle. See the following for more details on circadian rhythm. So now we live in a society where we're in the inner city, we're on the clock, we got schedules, we're not looking at the sun, moon, and stars, we're not gazing at the sun, we're not gazing at the moon, not gazing at the stars, not looking at the birds flying in, birds flying out, listening to the birds sing, looking at the animals in a mating season, we're not examining the crops or the plants, etc. We are disconnected from the things that the writers of the text were in awe in to remind them of the greatness of the Most High. So now that all of that has been affected by modern day society, we have been disconnected not only from the pre-exilic calendar, but we have now adopted a brand new system that has internally rewired us from the brain all the way down to our feet, to every cell and organ in our body, to be in accordance and in tribute and in subjection to an entity that is foreign and in opposition to the scriptures that we hold dear to. I don't think you understand how deep this is, but one day, when you research this, you're going to be like, wow, nobody's teaching this in regards to the calendar. This is why it's so hard, because all the time people present a new calendar, I'm like, man, that looks crazy. But they never told me, listen, we have to start with fitness. We have to start with time of your sleep, time management, going back out into the wild, into the wilderness, looking at the tree. These things will get you back in line with your internal clock, because this is what society is trying to keep you away from. Because when the time comes in the wilderness, you're going to be looking for a big brother to give you something, and you're going to be so lost in nature that Most High created to give you, so that way you have a solution in regards to time. I'm not going to read no more of this, but y'all can go back and research the sleep-wake cycle. And this is the end right here, the latter days timeline. After I give you this, I'm going to show you my model and we're going home. The latter days timeline. Why is a model based on Torah important in regards to determining time in the latter days? Can anybody answer this for me before I go into this real quick? Why do we have, yes?
Because he created time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Meaning the scriptures is time. That's all it is. The festivals we observe is what he had noted that we should observe in his process of redeeming Adam, or the Adamic race, from, you understand, you know, their origins or their beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we start off animals, and then the whole thing of the Passover, you're passing over into, so that's the beginning of time right there.
Mm-hmm.
The whole time is given us so that we would know the feast days, the relevant, you know, historians to come along to help us to understand where we are in time, like we in the end time.
Yes. So a motto for determining time will be important because things are going to happen in the end times.
Right.
So the latter days timeline, right? Somebody, you had your hand up? Yes.
The Most High, obviously, as he keeps his word, and we are in a time frame where he is doing a separation and distinction of his people. And when we return to him, according to the things he's given us to actually allow his power and his force to come through, it's going to make, and we do those things, not only will his power increase through us, but it also will make a distinction from the nations and what they're doing.
Yes.
They will begin to see who we are and see us doing what we're supposed to be doing, and we become effective in what
Yes.
we're saying. It also has to do with the activation of the spiritual gifts, because we're not functioning, and we keep asking, why are we not doing the things of the scripture? Why are we not doing this, and why is this not coming forth?
Mm-hmm.
And it is because we're out of sync
Yes.
with the Most High.
There you
So,
go.
in a nutshell, to get back in sync with the Most High, so we can rise and do what we're supposed to do
There you go.
before it's too late.
Exactly. That's beautiful.
Hallelujah.
And yeah, hallelujah to that, right? And again, sometimes we may wonder why we are a loss for power is because we are disconnected from the ancestors and the methods that they followed to determine time. See, they got their power from being in harmony with nature. And a lot of times we are disconnected from that and wonder why we have no power. And then when we see people go back to nature, we ridicule them like they're primitive or something wrong with them. And we wonder why they're so spiritually elevated, they're so more mentally inclined, they're more in sync, and we start to look at that as something fearful, but no, they're going back to the ways that the Most High had the ancestors doing. And because society teaches us to be in an urban setting and disconnected from nature, we see those people as being real foreign and things that you don't associate with. Yes.
You know, when you say ancestors and when you say nature, automatically I flinch because, again, as an elder, I've been aware of the cultural community for a long time, Afrocentric community, and they speak of the ancestors, they speak of natural, going back to nature, a vegetarian or vegan diet, et cetera, et cetera. But I question whether their use of nature and et cetera is really, or should we look at Torah in the order that we call to its super nature, meaning that we're keeping a divine clock. We're not on, the world clock or the Gentiles time frame, but he's called us out that we might be a light or a standard unto the Gentiles or to Africa or to the natural man, to the natural mind,
Yeah, I got you. Well, there's no need to flinch because we're not talking about animism, where we're worshiping nature. We're not talking about that. The scripture says specifically, do not look to gaze upon the sun, moon, and stars to worship after them like they're the ones that created you. Don't go after nature to worship after it like it created you, but to appreciate the creation of the creator. So that way, every time we are involved or engaged with it, it reminds us of him being responsible for the things that we have today.
But
a lot of times we put our trust in the things that are man-made as opposed to the things that the creator created in the earth.
okay, so there are two systems. Like when we came out of Egypt, Egypt is a man-made, natural, organic system of womb worship, basically. And we came out to honor the Almighty Creator, which identified himself in a male standard. Is that correct?
Well, I don't want to touch too much theologically in regards to that, but I would say along those lines, yes, I do agree along those lines. But the reason why I say that is because I want to deal specifically in regards to reckoning time, right? And Egypt or Mizraim had their own method of reckoning time based on their own cultural standard, their creation epics, their cosmogony stories, etc. So the Most High had to remove Israel from that because we were acculturating with that. So in order for us to worship the Creator, he had to first show that he's greater than the other deities or powers that's in Egypt. And then once removing this, has to give us a brand new way of reckoning time that was distinct from any other nation that was in circulation at that time. And when I show you my proposed model for the reconstruction of the pre-exilic Israel's identity in regards to menology or the reckoning of months, you'll see that it's distinct from almost any other nation in the past and even today, because he used that to make us distinct. So what I'm saying is we're going back to nature to appreciate nature, to understand the reckoning of time, because as you will see right here, let me just go through so you can see what I'm talking about. It's getting late. All right, Jacob's trouble, persecution of the house of Israel, whether it's the northern tribes or the southern tribes, is coming to a theater near you. Oh, excuse me, a reality near you. Jacob's trouble. The cry to exit from Babylon, once you see the persecution happens, the wilderness wanderings, the judgment upon the nations, the regathering and resettling of the house of Israel in the new kingdom, whether you know of the southern tribes, and, oh, okay, I guess that was it. I thought I had a sixth one, but I guess not. So, Jacob's trouble, persecution comes, you're going to see it happen to the saints, you're going to see all this wickedness happen in the world. The Most High is going to say, get out of Babylon, this world system, secular system, get out of there. Get out of there and go into your wilderness wanderings. Be autonomous, be separate, be distinct, be on the move, be on the go, because when this happens, you're going to be persecuted. But the reason why I'm calling you out of Babylon is so that when I judge the nations, the judgment doesn't hit you. But if you're connected with this Babylonian system, this Greco-Roman system, this Mono-American system that has a completely neglected or reckoning time, and we are worshiping after it because it is dictating our eternal clock and our external activities, etc., then when destruction comes, we're going to be right along with those who are destined to be destroyed. We're not going to be distinct, different, or unique from them. So let's run through this. I'm just going to give you some scriptures. I can't read all of it, but go to Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, where it tells you about Jacob's trouble. Daniel 12:1 says, at the time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will rise. There will be a time of distress such as not happened from the beginning of the nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Revelation 13:1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, etc., etc. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. These are the signs of Jacob's trouble. That's what the Most High says. The yoke is coming upon you. It's going to be like a woman who's in childbirth or who's in labor, etc. But he will be saved from it. But first, you have to go through Jacob's distress. You're going to see why this is important. Next one. The cry to exit from Babylon again. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 19, we jump down to verse 25. It talks about this entity that's here. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws, the set times. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time and a half a time, but the court will sit and its power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. So even though the Most High is telling you persecution is coming, he's also tying that with victory. You cannot have this without him telling you the victory, because otherwise you'd be depressed. Okay. Revelation 17:7, and the angel said unto me, wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which had the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And the 10 horns was usurped the 10 kings that received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour and with the beast. Revelation 18:1, we have the cry that says, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a liar of demons. She is a haunt for every unclean spirit, a hideout for every unclean bird. How you have unclean bird? There's no law, dietary law anyway. And a home for every detestable beast, so unclean beast. How you have an unclean beast if there's no dietary law? Okay, whatever. And all the nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her immorality. The kings of the earth were immortal with her. And the merchants, money, so money, political power, spiritual, merchants of the earth have grown wealthy through the extravagance of a luxury. Look at this. Then I heard another voice of heaven say, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins or contract any of her plagues, for her sins have piled up to heaven, and Elohim has remembered her iniquities. Give back to her as she has done to others. Pay her back double what she has done. Mix her a double portion of her own cup. Most High saying coming out of Babylon. This is not a physical locale specifically that is in Babylon, but it's talking about a world system dealing with merchants, politics, spiritual matters, and social constructs. This is very, very important, okay? The cry to come out from Babylon. After we're being persecuted, it's like, get out of there. You're being persecuted, get out of there. Next step is what? What I had up there next. The wilderness wandering. This is why this calendar is important. Revelation says, in a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon on her feet, crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars of the sky from the earth. Verse 5 says, she gave birth to a son, a male child who will rule all nations with the iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to Elohim and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness. The woman represented who? Israel. Into the wilderness, to a place prepared for her by Elohim, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a times out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away from her torrent. But the earth helped the earth. Helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. So the earth is what's going to protect Israel when they're in their second exodus, leaving out of Egypt or out of Babylon as a whole. And we have to go back to the earth and use these elements in order for us to receive its protection. It says, Micah 5:3, therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who was in labor bears a son, and the rest of the brothers return to join the Israelites. Then we have the judgment upon the nations, Jeremiah 25:31, and claim must come to the end of the earth because Yahuwah has a contrary with the nations. He is entering into judgment with all flesh. As for the wicked, he has given them the sword, declares Yahuwah. Thus say Yahuwah of hosts, behold, evil is going from nation to nation, and a great storm is being stirred up from the remotest parts of the earth. Those slain by Yahuwah on that day will be from one end of the earth to the other. They will not be lamented, gathered, or buried. They will be like the dung on the face of the ground. Micah 5:15 says, and I will execute vengeance and anger and wrath on the nations which have not obeyed. Revelation 16:9, the great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities and the nations collapsed. And Elohim remembered Babylon the Great and gave her the cup of wine of the fury of his wrath. Again, judgment is coming upon the nations. You cannot escape this. You cannot delay. You can't do nothing about it. All you can do is separate from them. Because when that wilderness wandering comes, you're not going to have no watch. You're not going to have no clock. You're not going to have no calendar. You're not going to have internet. You're not going to have no TV. You're not going to have no radio. How are you going to determine time? How are you going to determine time? And the regathering, Isaiah 11:12, Jeremiah 23:3, Ezekiel 37:21. All right, so let's get past that. All right, I think I got like 2 left. All right, here's the fun part. The restored pre-exilic Israelite sacerdotal menological model. I know that's deep, but it's just a count. All right. And because each word has a meaning, it's the reason why I chose it. I didn't just want to use calendar. Remember, I told you that's not in Hebrew. There's no Hebrew word for calendar. All right. So now, what model am I proposing based on all the data that I just showed you guys? It's a lot. That's the fun part. And this is what's going to take us home because I know it's late. All right. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
You're ready. All right. So after looking at all of the data, I had to filter the data. I had to deduce from the data. I had to say, okay, look, I can use this. I can't use that. This is consistent. That's not consistent. This came from this culture. This came from our culture. So now, how can I propose a sacerdotal system? Meaning that if we want to keep the feasts and festivals, if we're in our wilderness wandering, we have to use a model that goes back to Torah. And this model you can use no matter where you're at. And it comes strictly from the scriptures. You don't need no mathematical formulation, anything like that. Intercalation is done by the earth itself. Okay, let's go. First thing is, look for the what? Sidereal year constellation for the spring season, which we determined was Pisces, based on actual precession. You're not going to see the same constellation that Moshe saw. You're not going to see the same constellation that Flavius Josephus saw. You're going to see a new constellation because of axial precession and what's called the astrological ages that is in alignment with that precession. The Earth wobbling every 26,000 years, and every 2,160 years, you have a new constellation that brings the sun in. So remember, we saw during the course of the Enochian calendar, the historians, even before that, the stars are important for the season. So spring season is important, the vernal equinox, right? So you got to look at the sidereal. What star constellation is bringing in the sun? You don't need a mathematical formula for that. You can strictly stargaze, okay? All right. Number 2, what does that say?
The vernal equinox props of the sun using a sundial.
Now, remember we talked about the sundial, and I showed you Ahaz's step thing in his little mansion thing that he had. You can create a sundial almost anything. You can create it out of sticks and out of rocks. You can anywhere you at, you can make your own sundial and determine time. So you have to know the vernal equinox, right? And you can use that using a sundial and align that with the constellation that you see during spring season. So these two things you can use in the environment that you don't have to use a clock, calendar, watch, internet. So these things are important. The constellation, sidereal year, the vernal equinox. Number 3 is, what does that say?
Keep count of 365 plus solar days for overall day-to-day activity.
Slow down. So you got to keep count of at least 365. Remember I mentioned Enoch, what year, or how old was Enoch before he got translated, taken up? 365. Then I show you the prophetic count every day for a year, etc. So you also have to take care of the solar count, because if you don't, then you're not going to know when equinox comes, and you're not going to be able to determine the sidereal year. So the solar count is important for what? But the solar month counts can be a combination, as we saw, of 29, 30, and 31. So I'm not going to get too much into this right now, but I'll show you how you can determine this amount of time as far as 29, 30, 31. But I saw more effectively, you can use just 30 and 31, and you can get the 365-day solar count and make it in sections or segments of 30 and 31 days for the months, according to more detail in the text. But I can't get into that right now because I'm low on time. Read number 4. What does that say?
Look for seasonal crops in bloom,
Uh-huh.
bird migration, animal mating season, and weather to confirm timing and or to intercalate if necessary.
Now, before I started, what did I say about intercalation? What did I point out specifically in regards to intercalation?
It sets itself.
It sets itself. So if time is off, the weather, the crops, the animals will help you get it back in order. You don't need a mathematical formula because they are all synchronized to the electromagnetism of the earth, and via their brain and all the other physiological functions that they have, they are hardwired to the seasons of the earth. So you'll never go off if you look at the birds migrating in during the spring, leaving out during the fall, and mating. The weather, because you look at the temperature, the rainy season in Israel, remember I told you was what? November to what? March. So it starts in October, heavy in November, and it ends almost in March, going into the spring, going into what? Abib, right? When you have the stalk coming up in the air, because when it rains, that's when you sow seed. And you gotta look for seasonal crops in bloom. I mentioned that. So seasonal crops in bloom, bird migrations, animal mating season, and the weather to confirm timing to make sure everything is on alignment of this, and this. Well, not really this, but mostly this and this. And if it's not, then if you want to intercalate, you wait till the birds arrive. Listen, I didn't see the blue jays come in today. Maybe they'll come in another 2 days, and the blue jays come in. Okay, now I can start the time because it aligns with everything. You'll see that everything will fix itself. Okay. Oh, you're looking at the crops. I said, wait, hold on. You know what? Barley ain't here today. I thought the equinox was here. I guess I'm a little off a day or two. Let me wait. Oh, it's budding right now. Okay, the sun is right. The sundial's telling me this, and the constellation is there. Boom. Okay, now we can start. Okay. Intercalation. You can look at it. So once it's established, use the what? Dark moon. Dark moon. Full moon to begin the menological count for festival dates starting with the first month of Abib. So now I'm telling you to use the stars, the sun, the crops, the birds, the animal mating season, the weather, and the full moon all congruently together to determine the exact timing when you begin the festival dates. If you want to actually keep that in the wilderness. Remember, we're talking about the wilderness wandering. You have no minor convection to determine time, but nature. Are you following me? Okay. Now, this I'm just going to go into account. The Pesach lamb slammed during the civil twilight. Remember I told you about civil, nautical, and astronomical twilight? You remember that? Going from 0 to 6 degrees, 6 to 12 degrees, 12 to 8 degrees will determine where the sun is at over the horizon, will determine how much light that you have to still do work. The Israelites were told to slay the Passover during the twilight hours, but that would be the civil time where there's still enough light to still do activities. Nautical, it gets much darker, and the reason why it's called nautical is because the sailors will use the stars during that period of time to actually see in what direction they need to go. And astronomical twilight, which means little to no light at all, is when the sun is at the 12 to 18 degree mark in regards to its relation with the horizon. So you do the count after that. Chag Mazot starts the evening of the 15th day and lasts for 7 days. The first and 7th day is the day of rest. The offering of first fruit occurs the day after the weekly Shabbat, and I showed you my evidence for why I chose the weekly Shabbat as opposed to the high Sabbath, which will be the ending of the feast of what? Unleavened bread. All right, keep going. Count 7 weeks from the day of the offering of the first fruits to being in Shavuot. Count 7 full moon cycles. Now, this is important right here, because this is going to trip people up. So now I said you look for the constellation, you look for the vernal equinox for the sun. You still keep in count of 365 plus days. So you got to keep that for your day-to-day activities, right? And you can do a combination of 29, 30, and 31 days. You look for the seasonal crops in bloom, the bird migration, the animal mating, the weather. You look at the full moon. Once all of this is done, now you go chart the full moon to begin the Menological count for the festival dates. And I'll show you all the evidence of why I've used the full moon. And then now we're going to jump down to this, which is count 7 what? Full moon cycles for the establishment of the first full moon of Abib to arrive at the 7th month of Ethanim. How did I get this? Does anybody remember what I taught and how I got this? It was words that was used in the book of 1 Kings chapter 6, 1 Kings chapter 8. Yarak and Kodesh. And what is the importance of Yarak and Kodesh? Relationship. Yarak comes from Yariach, which means what? Moon. So that means that if Yarak is a derivative of Yariach and it has to do with a reckoning of time, it is directly related to the moon. And now we have the word Hodesh comes from Hadash, which means renewal period. So in order to reckon Ethanim, according to 1 Kings chapter 6, 1 Kings chapter 8, you have to use moon cycles. Now, people could be like, wait, what? That's crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. Moon cycles? Yes, in regards to the sacerdotal menological model for keeping the feasts and festivals. That's the everyday civil calendar still uses 365, still looks at the winter solstice, but if you're going to use the time period that the priests use in order to determine time, because they didn't care about the civil calendar, we have to use the method that they use, and we see that because when these 7 full cycles came, they knew it was a new renewing that brought in Ziv, which is the 2nd month, and I didn't even use the 2nd month, but the 2nd month also used this moon cycle, Ethanim and Bul, which is the 8th month, and each one of these things were determined using Yarek, and we have that in 1 Kings chapter 6, 1 Kings chapter 8, and if you don't read the Hebrew, you would think month there is consistent, and it means 2 different things. Okay. Follow. For the establishment of the first move would be to rise to the 7th month of Ethanim, have a teruah to signal. What's teruah? Anybody knows what that means? Teruah? What? Yeah, trumpet. To signal the month's arrival. Confirmed date to be after the what? Using a sundial. How would you be able to determine the equinox using a sundial in autumn? Look for what?
The falling of the leaves.
Okay, falling the leaves, but also as far as light is concerned.
The shadow.
The shadow, and that will indicate what in regards to night and day? Equinox. Almost half day, almost half night. So the sundial will be able to tell you if you're in the autumn season when the equinox is starting, because the 7th month has to be after this time, so that way you can reap the fruits and everything else has to happen after the fall. When you do the 7th full month, a full moon cycle from the first full moon in Abib all the way to this, it's always going to be after the fall when it's ripe to pick in the fruits. And this is important because this brings you into the end of the year, which is the Feast of Ingathering, to bring all the fruits in from the threshing floor, which is the wheat and the barley, and as well as the wine press, where you take the olives and you take the grapes in. Okay, almost done. Count 7 days after the teruah or the trumpets to establish Yom Kippur, which is the day of rest, right? And Yom Kippur was the important for who? The priests, right? Not the layman, but the layman was supposed to have a day of rest while the priests didn't do any work, okay? And then count 5 days after Yom Kippur to establish the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days and rest on the 8th day, end the lunar reckoning, and continue the solar count until next spring season. Now, the moon is used to determine the feasts and festivals, but not to determine a full year. Because pre-exilic Israel only had 4 months named because these 4 months encapsulized most of the feasts and festivals, with the exception of Shavuot. But that just had to do with the wheat, giving up the wheat from that harvest. Are you following me?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know you probably have some questions after this. We gotta go. So, and I say use natural intercalation methods for time gaps. So if you see that you're off some time, the animals won't be off, the plants won't be off, the weather won't be off. They're all going to be in alignment, and you just wait for them to tell you when the time is right to start the count. You don't have to add days. You don't have to add numbers and times. Nature will give you everything that is necessary to determine time the way the Most High deemed it. So the moon is not used for a full year. It's only used to mark these months for these seasons. You still keep a 365 plus solar count for the tropical year. You still have a combination of 30 and 31 days. Keep your sundial to know when the equinox is there, the solstice is there, etc. And also look for the sidereal or the constellation that brings in the sun, so you know when the start of the solar year begins. Now, this can only work ideally if you're not using the Gregorian calendar, which means that this will be very difficult for anybody today to follow unless you're living off the grid. But it's going to be a period of time where we're going to be in that wilderness wandering, and we're going to need a system that is not going to be worried about mathematical formulation, waiting to hear what Israel says as far as, is the crescent right or not, and what should we do? No, because you're not going to have any messengers. You're going to be on the go. So this is fully dependent upon nature. And when you keep the statutes, laws, and commandments of the Most High while you're in that wilderness wandering, He'll ensure that all of these things are in sync.
Come on now.
Okay. So again, it's going to take us being persecuted and being all together until we look at nature consistently day after day, month after month, year after year, and then we would agree on a system. Because Israel is scattered, we have all these different doctrines and so forth. It's very difficult to do it now, but I guarantee when our wilderness wandering comes, the remnant is going to cling to each other, and we're going to create methods that work through trial and error, so that way we continue to be in sync and align with the Most High, so we can receive our protection as we're going through persecution, and as the Most High is doing what He has to do. Now, last thing, I have an example here of 2016. I put up some example days, which is erroneously tied to the Gregorian calendar, but I had to do it so you guys can get an idea. But I'm just gonna leave this right here. So this is how it will work according to the model that I gave. Like I said, I used about 20-something years. Brother, so why don't you use 40 years? All right, I calculated another 17, 18, 19 years, 20 years. And I see that it's consistent. What is the consistency? Well, the consistency is this. The equinox brings in a year, right? And we see that based on all the evidence I showed previously. And then this year, the first full moon starts on the 23rd. The selection I have lamb supposed to start on the 3rd. The Passover supposed to be on the 6th and the 7th, according to my model. I'm not saying anybody else is wrong. I'm saying when I did this extensive research, I had to flush everything, start from scratch, and this is how I got it. Now, why is this important? When we get towards the end of the year, we know that the rainy season starts, the heavy rain season starts in the fall. As long as the rains are not too torrential, you can continue to have these feasts in the fall. It will never spill in to December. Just like this will always start in March, because in a calendar, a calendar as far as the moon is concerned, the most it will go is about 28 to 29 days. But if you take this model that I showed you previously and you apply it to, let's say, 40 years, 100 years, anybody, if you want to go crazy, you could do that. Go to 100 years and do a model of 100 years. Look at this, go to 100 years and make sure that every year in March, according to the Gregorian calendar, the equinox will start. And at the end of the year, doing that full moon count, it's always going to come before December, because September, October, November, if we want to look at it that way from our modern reckoning of time, it will always come before the torrential rains hit, where we can gather everything in regards to Israel. Now, we have to adjust this if we're here in America or anywhere else, because the weather is going to be different, the crops are going to be different, the birds are going to be different, but the model, the template stays the same. You have to go out there and see everything in your environment year after year after year to get consistency, to see a pattern, and then you can apply this template and it will work no matter where you are at. So the Bible gives you the template, but it can be used anywhere that you're on a known world, that you're scattered, being persecuted, and you still want to keep the feast days and be in alignment with that memorial, so you can be encouraged while in the wilderness that the Most High is going to eventually deliver you. Hallelujah. Now, with that, I'm done. It's over. I'm done. Nothing else to give. But the ultimate thing is we have to understand that this restores culture, because what I just gave you is something that we ourselves have created, well, I myself have created, without the modern conveniences of academia, without the modern conveniences of a Sahedrin, without the modern conveniences of the Gregorian calendar. It's a model that was created, and the purpose of culture is the social heritage of a group, organized community, or society. It is a pattern of responses discovered, developed, or invented during the group's history of handling problems which arise from interaction among its members and between them and their environment. These responses are considered the correct way to perceive, feel, think, and act, and are passed on to the new members through immersion and teaching. Culture determines what is acceptable and unacceptable, important or unimportant, right or wrong, workable or unworkable. It encompasses all learned and shared, explicit and tacit assumptions, beliefs, knowledge, norms, and values, as well as attitudes, behavior, dress, and language. So what I attempted is to restore our culture back into our hands and in alignment with the Most High has entailed. This is something that you're not going to get from the so-called Jewish community and the world. This is just strictly flushing everything, going back to the text, creating a model that you control and that you can pass on and that nobody else can govern but you. Okay. That's why I said I've never seen nobody do this before, but that's cool. And with culture, it leads to autonomy, which is the freedom from external control or influence, the right of an organization, country, or region to be independent and govern itself. You cannot be autonomous if you don't have a culture. And you can't have a culture unless you restore what was lost by the disobedience of our ancestors. So what I'm attempting to do is restore a culture so we can be autonomous and we can be free from external control and influence, because when we're persecuted and if we're so independent of society while in the wilderness, we're going to be wanting to go back. You know, things are going to happen to us, and when what's happening to us, because most says, come out of from my people. I've given you a model, restore your culture, go back to being autonomous, and in doing so, you will be exempt from the judgments. And with that, I'm done. Now, if anybody has a question or two, because I know I ran a little bit on time. Question, 2, 3 questions. Is it okay with Minister Carnes? We can end? Yes. So I know people should ask a question. You're like, what is that? Again, I know it affects the internal biological clock. You have to rewire everything. But if you take this and if anybody's brave enough to attempt it out there for a whole year, I would try to do that sometime and see how precise it is. But yes, you want to say something?
Yeah, first, I appreciate your research, academic dedication, and the purpose, trying to help us to unify as a people and understanding our link with the understanding universe and our calendar and our feast day is critical to us identifying ourselves as the children of the Most High.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a question though in regard to the moon thing. That I kind of comprehended a lot of it and agree with, but the full moon being the beginning of the count, I don't see that, or where is that biblically? I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I went to Exodus chapter 10, where I was talking about the plague of darkness, right? Does anybody have their Bible? Can somebody get Exodus chapter 10 real quick? I'll go through this real quick, it's not gonna take long. You wanna do it? Oh, okay. Oh yeah, all right. Exodus chapter 10, and it goes to the last, maybe I think 6 or 7 verses. It talks about the plague of darkness. And the plague of darkness was a sign to the Egyptians to showcase that the Most High, or Yahuwah, is supreme. The plague of darkness was for 3 days and 3 nights. The plague of darkness at night wouldn't have mattered if there was a dark moon, because you don't see nothing anyway. So the moon was in its fullness, or it was waxing or getting brighter. It was waxing or getting brighter, and it had to be in that state of a gibbous, which means that it's almost full of light, in order for the 3 days of night or darkness to affect the Egyptians in the evening. This, I believe, is cloud cover or a heavy cloud cover that the Most High hung over Egypt, because where the Israelites were, it says that they still had light. So they were not affected by that. So they were still able to see the sun, and they were still able to see the moon, but the Egyptians could not see the sun, they could not see the moon, and in order for that to be effective, you have to have a gibbous going into a full moon. And then when we see 2 chapters later, in chapter 12, okay, where you at? Scroll down, keep going. Wait, slow down. Keep going. All right, keep going. All right, wait, go up. Okay. And Yahuwah said unto Moshe, stretch out your hand towards heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. And Moses stretched forth his hand towards heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt for 3 days. The word days there, if you click on it real quick.
Days.
Yeah, days. Because remember, days, you have Yom. So Yom can be the full period of time that consists of nighttime and daytime, right? Because remember earlier, we had Layla, which means night, right? And we had Yom, which can mean day or the daylight, but you also have Erev, and you also have Boker, which can be the twilight time that's bringing in the day, that's bringing in the night. So we have a full period of time, which includes night and day, for this darkness to occur. Go back, Frank. So if we have a dark moon during these 3 days, it's not going to mean anything because it's already dark. so nobody's gonna care. Okay, it's dark. All right, whoop-de-doo, it's cloud cover is dark. Doesn't mean nothing. But the moon's full, it's 3 days darkness, and the Egyptians are using the moon to help determine time, and they can't see nothing. It creates a problem. And then it's like, okay, something's got to give. It says they saw not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days, but all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. All right, go to chapter 12. So now we see the darkness is coming upon the land. Remember, I also showed you about the navigation using the moon. When they left out, it was a dark moon. That's why they had to have the what? Pillar of fire by night so that they can travel. If you know anything about ancient Near Eastern cultures, when they would start their travels, their journeys will begin when the moon is full so they can get their direction or their bearings. They're not going to move if there's a dark moon or start their journeys to the dark moon. Now, they may be in the midst of their journey when it's a dark moon, but they're not going to start it because the moon gives them direction. They didn't have GPS like we have today. So they had to use nature to determine direction. All right. So it says what? And Yahuwah spoke unto Moshe and Aaron in the land of Mizraim, saying, this month, or this Chodesh renewal, shall be you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. So now 2 chapters later, the Most High says, all right, this is starting the month right now. There's an indicator that started the month here. And it goes back to the plague of darkness because, again, you have to have a gibbous or a full light in order for that plague to be effective at night and affect the Egyptians. And then it says, speak to the congregation of Israel, saying in the 10th day of this month. So the 10th day had not occurred at this time period, but there was something that brought in the month that then made the Most High say, okay, now 10 days from this renewing or this indicator of the renewing of cycles, you are to start your count to take your land and your house, etc. So now we see this here in the text. I went into chapter 13, go to the next chapter, where it says that the Most High was a pillar of fire by night so that the Israelites could travel. If the moon was already there, they wouldn't need the fire by night because they would know what direction to go. But because the moon is dark, you need an indicator to show you what direction to go because they're going from west to east. They're going from west to east. They're going across the Sinai Peninsula from west to east. From where they was at in Abaris, going all the way to what we would say is northwest Arabia, where Midian was at. This is important. So it says, keep going. Wait, slow down. Keep going. Keep going. I think it's towards the end. Keep going. Wait, there we go. You passed it. Go. All right. And they took their journey from Succoth and encamped in Etham in the edge of the wilderness. And it says what? And Yah went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud to lead them to the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light to go by day and by night. So he's giving them a cloud and he's giving them fire to help them in their directions or in their goings. But what the thing that we're saying is that if he had to give them fire by night, it's because it had to be a dark moon because they couldn't see in regards to direction. So they really needed the fire. The cloud was helpful, but the fire was more prominent because at least with the cloud, you still have daytime. You can see something. You can see landmarks and stuff. At night, they didn't have street lamps and all that other stuff. They didn't see nothing. They made makeshift fires and so forth, but people wasn't taking this en route. So the Most High had to say, listen, I'm going to make it easy for you guys by giving you light so you don't have to worry about the moon not being full. Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. So you can close it out. Close it out, friend, because I'm low on time. All right. You can close it out, friend. All right. You can close it out. All right. Does anybody want to give a quick comment and then I'm closing out? Quick comment about what they learned. I can't really take too many other questions. Yes.
Very, very good class. Really enjoyed it. I see now that the only way Israel can get on one accord, all as a nation on one calendar system, they had to come out of Egypt into the wilderness.
Yes.
So this time it's going to be the same way with all as a nation.
There you go. Excellent. Yes.
The root corn stick, and I said that because I learned recently what that scripture, what that really meant. Getting rid of pride and internal things that go and kick against the prick in terms of truth. And I think that especially in this time, that it's so important for us to let go of pray to, at least, let go of false doctrine and misinformation. Be okay with letting go of once the truth comes, because too much is given, much is required. So when you get the truth, there still comes responsibility, but we have to be humble enough to receive that truth.
Yes.
So that we can grow and do the right thing, because we are in a real detrimental time, and we haven't even gotten to the worst yet.
Exactly.
So this is the little space I think we have to still clean up and really become strong and powerful. So I just want to say praise the Most High for all the work that you and many of all of our people
Yes.
are doing, who are operating in their gifts.
Yes.
And we have to embrace each other in the fact that one is a doctor, one is a lawyer,
Exactly.
one is a priest, one is a nurse.
Healer,
I mean,
exactly.
you understand what I'm saying? The many member body which has
Exactly.
their gifts to do and work together to do what we're supposed to do. So I'm just really thankful.
Thank you for that word. And again, the purpose of this is to increase character. My particular lecture on this is testable, which means that over time, I'm gonna modify it, fine tune it. I'm open for change. I'm not saying it's definitive, it's conclusive for where I stand today. And I say that because I'm humble enough that if there's errors, I'm willing to go back and correct it if I find new data, facts, and whatever, to implement it, to retest my hypothesis and see if I come to the same theory. And that's the methodology that I showed you guys when I did part 1, that we should approach our studies and learning truth. So again, I'm not telling everybody got to count on the system, yo, wrong, and most likely gonna destroy you. Nah, that's the spirit of coming in. The spirit of coming in is humility. And listen, I'm presenting to you my body of research that took me, I'm not gonna say years, really. I really didn't even want to do this a long time ago. And when I sat down to do it, I lost nights of sleep, had to research, go into archives, interview people just to get information to put in this lecture for you guys today, so you guys can see my working model is not based on custom tradition or what somebody just told me or something I just grabbed off the internet, but hours and hours of research that I had to go into so you can see all my, I didn't hide none of my references. I gave you all my references. Most people that give you their conclusion never show you their references. I give you all my references. You can go back, double check it, see if there's errors or whatever. And I'm humble enough to say, if you find an error, let me know. It helps me grow. I'm not better than nobody in here. Nobody's better than anybody else. We work together as one body. So again, the purpose of this is to edify, for us to go back to culture, to rely upon one another for our survival, as opposed to fully relying upon our oppressor. You got a final comment? You got to go?
Do you have any idea what year it is?
What year it is as far as what?
Biblically, what year it is?
I have to go over that with you. That's kind of complicated because, you know, what we get from the Jewish people, they will tell you what year it is, 5776, etc. And that would be from the time of creation to now, etc. And that would be based on their determination of time. But again, that varies as well. I had to do probably another lecture to show you that. Just like I didn't go into the Sabbath one either. That's a whole nother lecture in itself. All right. And Minister Collins will probably do a lesson on that. Or I might do a lesson on that. But I didn't want to touch on the Sabbath because that would take us left field. So as far as what year we're in, does the Bible give it? It's possible, but we have to go through the same amount of research to see what we come up with. You know what I'm saying? And we'd have to do so after flushing all our presuppositions and going back to scratch by looking at facts, creating a pattern. From the pattern, we go to our hypothesis. From hypothesis, we go to our theory or conclusion. All right. So with that, I'm gonna give it back to Minister Carnes. Because if not, we'll be here forever. And I know people are tired and hungry. So thank you, everybody, for allowing me to speak. Hope this helps you in some way. All praise goes to the Most High. I'm just a vessel or just a messenger. And again, if you guys see any errors in here, find any new information or researching it, testing it, please bring it back to me, and I'll be more than happy to concede to the new data and implement it in my new hypothesis, leading to my conclusion. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Give him a chance to stop the recording.
Yeah.
We'll have the elders come forth, and I want you guys to stand up for a moment. I know you've been sitting there for a while, and I want to test this hypothesis as I pass the plate around, and you guys do it accordingly, right? Let me say this as I want to say to people that are part of the congregation, you guys know now that I'm not crazy, because we've been doing this actually with this presentation that he's done. We've been doing this for about 4 years now as a congregation. I know it's been a difficult thing, and I may come back and do a lesson in conjunction with what he's done, and I can show you how we came to that same conclusion just strictly from the scriptures.